evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Blather 267 Inevitable Outcomes. If I had to recite all the good news last week coming from the Oval Office, the Supreme Court, and Congress, I'd be talking for hours before we can even get started with the show, so you can sigh a sigh of relief. I'm not going to do that. What they all have in common is a brighter future for America. As Congress and SCOTUS rain on activist judges whose only interest is to stop the implementation of the policies the American people voted for, illegal entry into the U.S. drops 96%, and they thought it could be done. And the cleaning of our streets of imported gangs and terrorists continues unabated. President Trump launched a multi-pronged attack on the enemies of civilization and trade around the world. The Houthis are joining Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Assad regime and 1,000 extras into the port-a-potty of history. China's days of ignoring World Trade Organization rules and enriching itself at the expense of investors, entrepreneurs, workers, and consumers in the West, from currency manipulation and dumping to the naked robbery of intellectual property and massive industrial espionage, for the sole purpose of strengthening the military to threaten its neighbors and oppress its people, are now on the way to oblivion. They just don't know it yet. Russia is about to find out that they are no longer dealing with a brainless wonder of the last 4 years. The Iranians dropped the mask and sat down to try and negotiate directly with the US, and this will lead to the inexorable demise of Iran's nuclear aspirations and Russia's territorial ambitions. The dropping prices of commodities will strangle the Russian economy as new sanctions and the demise of its proxies strangles Iran and China reverts to eating itself. What was a pipe dream a year ago is now on its way to an inevitable outcome of peace and prosperity. Don't blink. It gets better by the second. Bab el-Mandeb will be safe again soon. Israel will eliminate its existential threats, and a new era of prosperity will settle over the world to the chagrin of socialists and other collectivist vermin. Obama wanted to, sorry, it gave me a bad taste, wanted to bring the US down a few notches to satisfy the requirements of his preposterous ideology. Now we can say it. He failed miserably in this, as in just about everything else he ever tried. Let's enjoy, dare I say, the new order. This is Solomon Bradley, the largest human repository of useless information, from my golden perch in Florida. And right next to me, and this time I did it right, is Thomas Victor, the only living expert in 111 flamethrowers and so many more things, from Californication in the left coast. Now, did you notice that I pointed in the right direction and didn't mix the intro?
I sort of let you do what you're going to do because I'm not a corrector. I don't correct people. Like when people mispronounce words, I never correct them because I don't know how to do that without sounding like a jerk.
Like a pompous ass. All of them are.
Well, my sister worked for one of the world's worst bosses, and this woman went off to a seminar on how to be a better boss. And she came back saying things like, let me give you a specific example. So she had learned words phonetically. And so everyone was cracking up behind her back. And in that case, not to score points, but just to spare the poor woman mortification, I think I would have taken her aside and said, let me hear everything you learned, and then I'll tell you how to say it the right way. Because, she was, apparently she wasn't an approachable person, so it wouldn't have worked anyway. If you told her you're mispronouncing the words, um, you know, it, it's weird though that things uh, 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 things that are pronounced the wrong way become mainstream. Like everybody else now says waiting online when they mean waiting in a line, such as at the DMV. They always say waiting
Right.
online. And
If I'm waiting online, I'm doing a Google search.
well, exactly. And what are you supposed to do? Correct the entire country?
No, it's not worth it.
I learned something that I never knew. Uh, uh, People, not just Americans, but our neighbors to the north, they're utterly porous. I watched a Canadian American citizen who recently moved to the United States. He said after giving Canada its last chance, and he said that the reason, okay, the current, nobody really knows how this happened, but there is a guy who became prime minister without being elected, and now he's running for election against Pierre Poilievre, who for a long time presented himself as a conservative, and now the two men are locked in who can hate Trump the most. And this Canadian American citizen said that Canadians are completely brainwashed by the Canadian press. And the reason Canadians hate Trump so much is because the press has completely hidden from the Canadian electorate the fact that Canada has had tariffs, outrageous tariffs on American products for years now, for decades. And their position, the media position, which is what Canadians believe, is that out of the blue, Trump suddenly
Yep.
decided to destroy Canada for no
Yep.
reason other than the fact that he's
And
insane.
Canada never, ever use tariffs against dairy products or auto parts. Never. They never did that.
Well, Canadians
You're
see
just hallucinating, if you think they did.
Canadians see themselves as the world's nicest, kindest, most polite people. Now, I've been to Canada. I drove uh, up the west coast to Edmonton and back. And Canada is one country that I will never visit again because I have never met more hostile people in my entire life. It was nothing but hostility all the way up. The man I interviewed was an illustrator, nicest guy in the world, and he invited us into his house. My brother went to take pictures, and the first thing he did, without me asking, was apologize for the hostility I got from Canadians. And I went, "What are you talking about?" I didn't want to. I didn't want to say, "Yeah, how can you live in this country of assholes?" But from the second we crossed the border, we were told all you have to do is just go. No passport needed. I didn't believe that. I brought my passport. First thing out of the border guard was, "Where's your passport?"
Yep.
Then they took apart our car, brought in the dogs, had us open our suitcases, rummage through our suitcases. The only thing they didn't do was strip search us. But the first thing they also did was to separate us.
Well,
So,
it was just one look at you and nobody wanted to see you naked.
well, there's that. But they treated us as if we were cartel suspects.
Yeah.
And at every motel, they were hostile. They didn't want us to stay there. At every convenience store, they were hostile. They didn't want us to buy their gas. And I got the message. Americans aren't welcome in Canada, and I'll never go back. I don't care what the future of Canada looks like. I have no interest in going back. I would go to Norway.
You're not missing much.
Well, this is what this Canadian American was saying. The two guys running for prime minister the more leftist guy says that Canada's going to become the world leader in trade, and they're going to build a trade bloc specifically to destroy the United States. And he's out of his mind, and the people who are supporting him, they're out of their minds. Canada is in no position to lead anything. Um, Canada
No.
is, for all intents and purposes, the 51st American state. And if you say that to
They are going to bend over and grab their ankles. They have nowhere to go.
well, this is the thing. And Poilievre has been forced to come out as anti-Trump because he started dropping in the polls. He was 25 points ahead. He's down to only 10 points ahead now because the other guy is painting Trump as worse than Hitler, and his he's getting the Canadians to support the Red Chinese and their slave labor shops. The highly moral Canadians who were the best people in the world are now supporting slave labor in China. It's demented.
And the socialists in Spain.
Absolutely.
But I have terrible news for all of these assholes. They're missing the boat.
Yeah.
They're missing the boat. They think that China is a superpower. They do. In their hatred for the US, they're desperate to find an alternative. And where there is none, they make it up. And they've made China into an alternative. China itself, it's going to be begging within the year.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to last a little bit longer because they actually think they own something. And they're arrogant. And the normal economic problems do not affect them immediately because their entire economy is manipulated. Everything is controlled by the Communist Party.
Mm-hmm.
They lie, they cheat, they release wrong information, they print money, don't tell anybody. So they can keep appearances for a while, but ultimately, the whole system will collapse on itself. And anybody betting on the Chinese are going to collapse right next to them.
Well, this is the thing that okay, when I say Canadians, of course, I mean I shouldn't have to say
There are exceptions.
Of course, I'm generalizing very unfairly, but
yes, we have William Shatner, who may be a Canadian but doesn't look like one.
Well, the Canadian voter is like the Californian voter, and Californians have an inexhaustible ability to vote against their own self-interests, and the Canadians are the same way. Like they want to vote for a guy who just might end up to be worse than I already forgot his name. The guy whose eyebrow fell off.
Trudeau.
Yeah.
Not Trudeau. Trudeau.
Right, and this is like the Chicago situation where they vote out somebody and put in somebody who's infinitely worse than Mayor Beetlejuice. The guy who's now mayor of Chicago has about an 80 IQ, judging by the way he speaks. And look at poor Chicagoans. I mean, they've lost the black Chicagoans have lost everything to illegal aliens. And here's Canada basically they're embracing things. Just because they hate Trump, they're embracing things that go against everything Canadians claim to stand for.
Never stood for anything. Canada, until very recently, a province of the United Kingdom, that obtained its independence in our lifetimes, but is still, under the stewardship of King Charles III, who happens to be King of Canada, because Canada is a monarchy which people tend to forget. They call themselves a republic. These fucking idiots whose population increased twofold when loyalists in the US decided to go north because they couldn't stomach independence from England. And they joined the people who had been uh, at a constant state of war with the English colonies, and who had organized the most uh, horrendous massacres of colonists in the 17th and early 18th centuries. What do you expect? No, they're not the same as Americans. They don't have our heritage. They do not have any appreciation for the ideas of liberty enshrined in our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence. They're a bunch of fucking morons who have been essentially living off whatever falls off of America's table.
Well,
Without American auto workers, without American enterprise and capital, they'd be eating maple bark.
Canadian politicians are very proud of the fact that Canada has no First Amendment. And God forbid you ever find yourself hauled in front of a Canadian human rights tribunal, as they call it, because they have a 100% conviction rate, because the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal is allowed to change the rules as they go in order to ensure convictions. That was built into the system.
Yes.
So they have literal self-admitted kangaroo courts in their country that they're proud of.
Yes.
So,
it's the Canada way, baby.
If you go to Canada and you run afoul of the Canadian Human Rights Court, just go in and accept your punishment, because there's literally no way you could win. You can be hauled in front of a Canadian Human Rights Tribunal with a recording that proves the person who made the complaint against you was lying, and you'll still get convicted. This has happened in Canada. So why would anyone? What the Canadian voters are standing up for is government. And it's like Californians. Californians, when their government is criticized, they take it personally. They stand up in defense of government. Who does that? There's a lot of us who stand up in defense of Trump.
People who get paid on time by the government.
Well, this is the thing, that American Democrats are now running on protecting illegal alien criminals,
Yep.
higher taxes, of course, and maintaining government thievery. Those are their three pillars now.
Those are their claims, yes.
And okay, you and I were talking about the midterms. If things go the way they're going now, the midterms are going to be magnificent for the Republican Party. I mean, Trump is getting the hard stuff out of the way.
You know, I always say complacency is the mother of defeat. Don't count your chickens until the coop is closed. But one thing that we were discussing yesterday that I said, Trump just announced his intention of eliminating income tax for Americans making under $150,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, for people who say, "Oh, you're responsible," it would cost the U.S. next to nothing.
Yeah.
Half of those people are not paying any taxes anyhow; they're just being bothered, and the other half pay so little, it's insignificant. It probably costs more to process their tax returns than whatever they bring in. But nevertheless, the fact that something like 60% of the country, 70% of the country wouldn't have to bother with 1094s anymore. If he does that, not only is he gonna win the midterms by a fucking landslide, nobody's gonna talk about putting his face on Mount Rushmore. They're gonna want to carve Pike's pick in his image.
Well, this is the thing, that Trump is just getting started, and he's getting win after win after win in the Supreme Court. The press reports him as defeats, but okay, we were talking about Amy Coney Barrett. There was a spate of hatred of Amy Coney Barrett.
Yep.
Amy Coney Barrett is a devout Catholic woman, so she has a built-in, almost genetic, emotional pull towards illegal aliens. But she only votes with the left when it's already going to be a 5-4 vote. So who cares? Let her vote with the left as long as the conservative side wins.
Yes, I personally don't give a shit. And of all the decisions in the past 4 or 5 years now, I don't find any objectionable.
No.
Not one.
We have people on our side who are idiots, who are saying, why hasn't Trump done X yet? And it's like, okay, again, you're talking about crap that doesn't matter. You're talking about fantasy stuff. You're talking about infantile stuff. Again, you want to see the orange jumpsuits. You want to see the people make the perp walk. Well, I don't care. I don't care.
In the end, those fucking assholes are no better than Fidel Castro.
Yeah.
You and I discussed this back in the golden age of Q-tardism in 2018, when they were doing the same fucking thing. And I want to see Hillary in an orange suit doing a perp walk. Actually, at one point, those imbeciles were saying that Hillary and Obama were already in Guantanamo. Remember that shit?
I remember that.
I actually saved the original posts because I know people are going to say, no, Q never said that. Oh, bullshit. But that mentality, which, by the way, more and more and more and more, I believe that if you scratch deep enough, you're going to have China or Russia propaganda effort behind those assholes. This is demoralization at its most basic. Oh, I'm not gonna be okay until I see a perp walk. I want to see those people arrested. Okay, I'm gonna surprise some of you. Number one, people can commit a crime, and the best of the district attorneys may not get enough evidence to convict in a court of law. There's a difference between we all know she stole and being able to document it in a court of law. It has its own dynamic. So I know it takes time. I used to say anybody who's ever been involved in a civil suit knows that it could take 3 to 4 years, sometimes longer, depending on the complexity of the issue.
Well, if Hillary Clinton gets arrested, she's going to delay the trial for the rest of her life.
She's not going to spend a night in jail, and he's not going to jail. And frankly, at this point, I think that ugly, drunken blob watching the world forget her from Chappaqua is priceless. Leave her there. Nothing is more damaging to the psyche of that bitch than finding herself irrelevant. Everyone who calls for her arrest is giving her pleasure.
All of them. Like how often do you think about Obama? I don't think about Obama ever. How often do you think about Biden? I don't think about Biden. Biden's history. He's gone. He's never coming back.
Yeah. And by the way, Biden will never be tried.
No.
He will be found incompetent to stand trial.
Well, and
we're going to waste time, effort, money, and on a distraction with no purpose. Fuck him. I don't give a shit what happens to him.
Well, see, this is the thing. People forget the Republicans had a massive advantage in the House until they decided to go after Bill Clinton.
Yes.
And they blew it. They lost this super majority. It was, and what did, when you think of Bill Clinton, almost nobody thinks of him as an impeached president, just in the way nobody thinks of Trump. Nobody even mentions Trump was twice impeached. Somebody like
Who
Rachel
gets it?
Maddow might have said it a couple of times during the campaign season, but nobody cared. Nobody gave a shit.
If you're twice impeached, I'll go fuck yourself.
Yeah. So
You mean that if I accuse you 3 or 4 times of some made up bullshit, you're going to be the accused this or that for the rest of your life?
yeah. No, Trump recently said that Kamala should become a YouTube influencer chef. She should cook for
Well,
YouTube.
maybe she should do a podcast with Meghan Markle.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, we can have that, and we can have Prince Harry work as a kitchen helper for both of them.
Well, a floor sweeper. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, the none of these people matter. Obama, like crapped away whatever power and influence he had in the last election. He doesn't matter anymore. The new face of the Democratic Party is AOC and Jasmine Crockett
and Bernie,
and Bernie.
Bernie's still out there campaigning against the oligarchy. I saw a rally in Los Angeles today. I couldn't stop laughing. My mother had to come in and said, "What's going on?" And said, "Look, Mama," and she started laughing.
I heard
Fighting the oligarchy.
I heard somewhere that they said that 600,000 people attended the DC anti-oligarchy rally, and I just thought that was the
Bullshit.
funniest thing I'd ever heard.
Bullshit on steroids. If they're gonna lie, I don't know why they don't say 5 million.
Exactly.
You know, there wasn't enough people there to fill the national stadium.
No, and okay, they had Hassan Piker there. Hassan Piker started out talking about love. Then he demanded the genocide of all Israelis.
Yeah, of course.
And then he started talking about communism, and he was wearing $40,000 worth of clothes.
Somebody said in the chat, Tim Walz was booed by military veterans.
Yeah.
God, yeah. I mean, he's gotta be totally nuts to go in front of a veterans audience. By the way, did you hear the one when President Trump says something like, "I didn't believe men could menstruate, and then I met Tim Walz."
It's perfect.
I mean, yeah, he's absolutely right. Now I have to question my entire belief on the subject.
I saw this clip of him. He was introduced, and they had this catwalk. It went out from the stage, and he went out, and the way he was walking, and he was twittering his fingers. He was going, and I just thought, yes, they've called him everybody's favorite uncle. I have no clue who did that.
It's everybody's favorite aunt. You're not gonna convince me otherwise.
That was terrible. That was
when he was prancing about on the stage. Oh God!
Yeah, going like this.
It's a parody of the gay '80s.
It was just ridiculous, and okay, they're getting even worse. I mean, AOC and Jasmine Crockett are now essentially in charge of the party. I didn't know that Jasmine spelled her name Jazzmin, which is a phonetic spelling of the word Jasmine.
Yeah.
And Jasmine is a big fat faker. Jasmine grew up speaking standard English, and now she's self-ghettoized.
Wasn't she a Princeton graduate or another Ivy League?
Yeah. I mean, she's a bigger faker than Obama, and
yes,
and she's
a bigger faker than Pocahontas.
Well, she's appealing to like 6% of the population, and they're going to get massacred.
You really think that many?
Well, it's the people who support Trump's immigration policies the most are Black Americans, and the press the press is working overdrive. There's some idiot 17-year-old who stabbed to death another 17-year-old because the stabber was in the wrong tent and he felt
Oh yeah,
disrespected. So
yeah.
he,
Nothing speaks self-defense. Like going into somebody else's tent, picking up a fight, and getting hold of a knife you brought to the place just in case.
yeah, and they're trying to make. I mean, they're bragging over the fact that his legal defense fund has raised $350,000. So what?
I don't give a shit.
No, I mean,
Rapists can get $300,000 because there are enough idiots in this country. The only people who cannot get a decent amount of money, it's us, because we're not grifters, so we don't know how to do it.
well,
By the way, a grifter that does know how to do it is somebody says here that praying mantis, I mean medic, is still on that bullshit. Bullshit meaning the cutardism.
we say it again. Who?
Praying mantis,
Mm-hmm.
otherwise known as something medic. Um, the son of a bitch is still grifting out of cutard bullshit.
Yeah, and see, this is all ancient news. Like, okay, there were people asking me to go back on Twitter and start writing about, I don't know, the Middle East. The Middle East of today is completely different from the Middle East of 2018. 2015 was when I started writing about, say, the Saudis. 2014, I started writing about the Israelis. 2015, I started writing about the Saudis. Everything that I wrote is now obsolete, in the sense that it's a completely different place. It's completely different geopolitically. It's completely different in terms of military technology. I don't know if you've noticed, everybody stopped talking about Syria. Why is that? Why have they all stopped talking about Syria? My guess
No
is,
Jews, no news.
or it's not the disaster that they claimed it was going to be.
No, it isn't, and we knew it.
So the news is that the Iranian mullahs have lost all their muscle. The only armed force they have left is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which can only kill unarmed civilians.
Oh, and a few militias in Iraq,
Yes, you're right. You're right.
in Iraq. But I cannot tell you now on air. I will after we close the show. They're very important people, some that you appreciate very much, on the ground in Iraq at this very moment, shaking them loose.
Oh, you mean pulling them away from the mullahs?
Well, actually, pulling them away from control of Iraq.
Ah, okay.
You're going to see changes in Iraq that are going to be faster because Iraq, unlike other places, it fell into the hands of Iran
Exactly.
only because Obama gifted the fucking place to Iran.
Uh-huh.
And more than half the population of Iraq, from the Kurds in the autonomous Kurdistan region to the Sunnis in Al Anbar, weren't happy at all. And essentially, Iran controlled the government and the armed forces, but not the territory.
Well, even the majority of the Shia are Iraqis before they're Iranian
Yes.
Iraqis. So,
Yeah. Yep.
and uh-huh. Go ahead.
So it's not that Iraq went to Iran, it's that Obama and then Biden gifted the government of Iraq to Iran. That is about to change. And we have right now people in Iraq doing that.
Well,
You're going
okay.
to see a lot of things happen with Iraqi oil and how it's exported and how the monies are distributed. You're going to see Iran kicked out of Iraq, and this is already underway.
Well, see, okay, this is going to sound weird. As we talk about this, let's talk about Bill Maher. Bill Maher recently wrote that the White House, a crazy man is not sitting in the White House. Bill Maher met
Yes.
Trump, and Bill Maher was shocked out of his tiny gourd that Trump isn't crazy, and that Trump was nice to him, and that Trump wasn't insulted by him, and Trump gave him a good time, and he was shocked. Um, Much of the world is like that until they meet either Trump or people directly representing Trump, and Trump explains to them, I'm not your grandfather's American president. I'm not here to take over your country. I'm not here to install anybody. I'm not here to do anything except help if you ask, and make a deal with you if you're interested. And who wouldn't be interested in making a deal with the United States, especially if it means that we get to rule ourselves? you know, we get
Yeah.
to be free to choose our own way forward. And Bill Maher was considered, the smart leftist, and Bill Maher thought Trump is insane. Bill Maher had it in his little noggin that Trump is crazy, and now Bill Maher realizes that Trump isn't crazy. Um,
No. Remember that Bill Maher is not an intelligent person.
no,
He, he
apparently
he's a
not.
he's a mediocre comedian with some clever writers,
True.
and that's about it. It he cannot be accused of having a brain. And even when he has the evidence on top of his face, he still tries to slime his way into, well, I hope he will be outside of the White House as kind as I saw him inside. He still doesn't fucking get it.
Well, see, okay, Bill Maher is a Californian. I don't know anything about Bill Maher, don't know where he was born, nothing. But Bill Maher is a Californian, and Californians hate Republicans as part of their identity. And there's plenty
Yes.
of conservative Californians. So, of course, I don't mean all Californians, but Californian leftists hate without knowing why because it's part of their identity. And there are people in the Middle East who are more reasonable than American leftists. And you know, these are people who, judging by the way they dress, you would think, oh, he's gonna hate my guts. And the guy asks you to sit down and says, let's talk. Let's have some tea. Let's have some fatty lamb and see if we can make a deal. And they don't hate us. They just want to be, they want to have the freedom. They want to have everybody off their back. And the last bad actor in the Middle East are the Iranian mullahs.
Yeah.
So
They
when they,
they finished their face meeting with the American delegation in Oman today.
okay,
They came out with a communique that they had a positive conversation.
yeah, it's like,
You know what that means in diplomatic circles, right?
yeah. No, what happened was they were handed photos of their homes with their private cars and license plates, and they were said, "We know everything about you, buddy. We know where your bank accounts are. You have to stop this. You had a great run. You went all the way from 1979 up to today, and now
Yeah, that's
it's
it.
over."
Time to go like Daffy Duck and Bugs Bunny and exit
Yeah. With the straw hat as they're exiting off.
With a straw hat and a cane,
Yeah.
and exit through the side of the stage.
Yeah.
This is it. It's done.
Yeah.
It's done. And I heard today I had to take my wife to the airport. On the way back, I was listening to Fox and others. And by the way, they're all the same shit. I don't care. People say CNN this. They're all the same shit. There is no distinguishing characteristic between news outlets of news media in the US. The bullshit I had to hear about confronting another superpower, China. Yeah, China is a superpower. If China is a superpower, men can get pregnant. Let me put it that way. You have to have the same degree of delusion to accept either premise. That the US needed to make a good offer to Iran because we cannot afford a nuclear Iran. You know who cannot afford a nuclear Iran?
China.
Iran. No, Iran.
Yeah, true.
Because if they say, Eureka! We got... and that's it, because that's the moment they all die.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed a few things in the markets this week. I discussed with people in Quad Verum the tariffs extensively. But there is more to that. There is more to that. Trump is about to change the way the world works.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going into a territory we've never been before. Because there is not a fucking moment in the history of this planet where we've had better than half the world. I mean, the half the world that produces 98% of its GDP with balanced exchanges and zero tariffs. And yet, we're about to see a waterfall, a Niagara of accords, not a domino of accords, that is going to bring 90 countries and 98% of the GDP of this planet into synchrony.
Mm-hmm.
Who's out of this synchrony? Oh, well, let me say the usual culprits: China, North Korea, Russia, Iran, the dregs of this planet. I don't think they have time now to do a turnabout and try to get into the bandwagon.
No.
They're already fucked. They just don't know it yet. To Russia's already monumental problems, kind of like Ukraine kicking ass, and Ukraine is kicking ass. 1,600 rocket launchers were destroyed in the Russian army last week.
The Ukrainians are bombing Moscow every single night.
Every single night. And they're bombing military bases 1,000, 1,500 miles from their own borders. They are doing whatever the fuck they want, because Russia is not only lost control of the air, is lost the ability to limit Ukrainian drone incursions anywhere onto Russian territory.
Hold that thought. Just a real quick thing, since people like to know about weapons. The greatest threat to the Ukrainians over the last year was the Russian glide bombs. They took the biggest, fattest bombs they had, some of which weighed 3,000 pounds.
Yep.
Put wings and a tail on them, and then they put them in a bomber that went up to the stratosphere and dropped it in Russia, miles behind the front line, and this thing would glide, and it was guided, so it would glide to the target, and a 5,000 pound bomb the explosion is it's catastrophic. And the Ukrainians have come up with a solution that prevents these bombs from reaching their targets. It's classified. We don't know what it is, but it's worked so well that the threat from the glide bombs no longer exists. And that was the last thing the Russians had in their military arsenal. So, and despite everything you've seen and heard between Trump and Zelensky, Trump has been supplying the Ukrainians with everything they need, which is one of the reasons why they're bombing Moscow on a nightly basis. So Trump and Zelensky will say one thing in public for public consumption, but behind the scenes, and as you pointed out, Saul, the Ukrainians have to do the military damage. Trump has his base to think about. So we as Americans cannot, regardless of what the Russians do, we can't start bombing the Russians. It's too late for that.
We will. It's too late or too early.
Okay, good point.
Because Trump, in order to not lose half of his base, all of these Q-tards and idiots that we were just discussing a moment ago, he couldn't pressure Putin and favor Ukraine openly because all of these assholes are anti-Ukraine. You and I have speculated that maybe because Zelensky is Jew and these are fucking anti-Semites. And Trump couldn't do it, but facts are facts. Despite the rhetoric, Ukraine accepted a ceasefire, entered into agreements with the U.S. for the exploitation of minerals and other and metals in Ukraine, in Ukrainian territory, and an association between Ukraine and the U.S., which gives the U.S. a vested interest in the future of Ukraine. Putin rejected the first offer for a ceasefire in similar terms to those accepted by Ukraine. They then accepted a ceasefire proposal to immediately violate it and bomb civilians in Ukraine indiscriminately. And last week, Trump issued an ultimatum. And his ultimatum went along the lines of, we're not going to be negotiating forever. This is not a forever negotiation. If you don't turn around and confront this seriously, we're going to have to open the gates of hell on you. Now, what does that mean, the gates of hell? Take your pick. It means whatever the crap Trump wants to make it when the time comes. It could be turning Ukraine into a porcupine, metal porcupine. It could be attacking Russian military targets on Ukrainian territory. You take your pick. What I can tell you is that Putin is definitely not in favor, and Ukraine is safe. And NATO is just announced $21 billion in equipment for Ukraine. Belgium is announced that they're finally going to deliver their F-16s that were promised 2 years ago. So things are moving in a rather interesting way and not in favor of Putin, whose economy is already in a shambles, whose capacity to wage war is diminishing by the hour. And if you recall, nearly 100% of the drones used by Russia are now Shaheens from Iran. Well, that's about to disappear. And what happens? Oil just dropped from the 80s all the way to 54. What happens if oil gets to 45?
That's the end of Russia.
Period. They're no longer viable. They're already dedicating 70% of their income to the military with no results because there is more thievery than production. They're not winning. Now take the money away, all of it.
One thing Trump can do is he can tell Putin that beginning on a certain date, Americans are going to start arriving in Ukraine to begin the process of implementing the deal we made with the Ukrainians.
Yes.
And if those Americans are harmed in any way, we'll hold Russia responsible. And then basically it's like, Putin, do you want to gamble that Trump won't respond by flattening every Russian military base, unit, and person in Ukraine, within the borders of Ukraine?
He's not going to bomb Russia.
No, we're not going to bomb Russia.
But there's not going to be a Russian left alive in Ukraine.
Exactly. And there's people who, for whatever reason, they oppose war, and as George Orwell said, that's as far as they care to take their thinking. Yeah, war sucks, but welcome to the real world. And sometimes you have to go to war with people, like Putin, for example.
Imagine all of these assholes telling George Washington, let there be peace. Why are we killing each other with the Brits? They're our cousins. Surrender and accept the sovereignty of the king, and we'll have peace at last.
Or it's more like, don't fight. And it's like, well, what about this? What about that? Well, all I know is I oppose war. And it's like, okay, your opinion doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Go fuck yourself.
Let me turn you around and aim you toward the door. Your opinion doesn't matter, because there are people in this world, and Vladimir Putin is one of them. Xi of China is probably one. The Iranian mullahs are definitely part of this group. The only thing they understand is bombs dropping on their heads. And the Russians have committed wholesale war crimes since 2022, like war crimes of the likes that Europe hasn't seen in over 80 years.
I've spoke to European members of parliament who went to Ukraine on visits to Ukraine, and who have seen the exhibits the Ukrainians mounted with the film and the pictures they took when they took Busha back.
Mm-hmm.
These are grown men who cried while telling what they saw. The savagery of the Russians in Busha, when they had to withdraw, they killed everybody and their mascots, entire families, old people, children, their pets.
Also, by tradition, Russians are mass rapists. The Russians committed the greatest act of mass rape in history when they went into Germany at the end of World War II. And
you could say that half of Germany have a Russian grandfather today.
Yeah, and they've done the same thing in Ukraine. So this whole, I oppose war, and that's it. I'm sorry, the only way you can stop people like the Russian troops, okay, here's something about Russians that you'll find less of in the West. Ukrainians at the start of the war, they were releasing intercepted phone calls. And I remember one, it was a Russian soldier talking to his wife, and he said, where else am I going to have the opportunity to murder people and rape them? And his wife just laughed. So this is a different group of people we're dealing with. And the only thing they understand is bombs dropping on their heads and machine gun bullets cutting them down as they charge. And it has to be done, because when the mindset is oh boy, now I have the opportunity to commit mass murder and mass rape, you're telling me that it's immoral to go to war against people like that? You're the immoral one if that's your viewpoint,
No, it's insane. And again, the other one is to try and compare Russians to us. We're not from the same civilization.
No, we're not.
They're savages. They're 300 years behind
Hmm?
in in social evolutionary history. These people are living 300 years, plus 700 years. These people are living in the times of the Albigensian Crusades.
Yeah, yeah. They are still of the mindset that a war must be a war of extermination. And, we're talking Genghis Khan. We're talking, I mean, the wars of extermination were fought in far antiquity, like long before the Middle Ages. Like even in the Middle Ages, they weren't fighting wars of extermination anymore. So you can make the argument that the Russians are over 1,000 years behind us.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, I just compare it to, let me see, 800 years ago, so we're not that far apart.
Yeah,
They are culturally, they are unintelligible for most of us.
yeah,
And anybody who doubts what I'm saying, they can go read Dostoevsky and find out about the Russian ethos in the mouth of the Russians. Read Solzhenitsyn, read Dostoevsky, learn a little bit about the Russian character, and then you'll realize that there is very little to negotiate with the motherfuckers.
yeah. No,
And I can say motherfucker because Trump says motherfucker.
the Russian Revolution took place in November of 1917,
Yes.
and the communists, after they took over, there's a lot of newsreel footage. The Soviets were really proud. They massacred the wealthy peasants known as kulaks. They wiped them out.
Yep.
And
In Ukraine.
In Ukraine,
7 million of them.
They were all murdered with pistol shots to the backs of the head, and this was done as entertainment. You see these
and left to rot.
You see these,
and when people from Poland and Eastern Russia were brought to their lands to resettle it, they had to leave because of the stench of the dead.
You see these newsreel footages of what looks to be a picnic, and then they march some guy up. He stands there, and somebody walks up behind him and shoots him in the back of the head, and everybody cheers, "Hurrah!" And those were everyday Russians. Those were people who were there for the spectacle. And that wasn't 1,000 years ago. That began. I forgot his name. He went to Mexico and it died with the
Leon Trotsky.
Trotsky. Okay.
He died of a pickaxe to the head.
To the head. Trotsky was considered a moderate, and after the main fighting of the 1917 revolution, Trotsky created armored trains that carried around death squads of men who wore red leather outfits, leather pants, leather jackets, leather gloves, and they just went from place to place committing mass murder. And that was how Trotsky introduced the moderate aspect of Soviet communism.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody ever considered him a moderate, but he's the author of the theory of permanent revolution.
Mm-hmm.
The revolution is never over.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be fought every day of everyone's life, generation after generation, and it's never over. And we always have to do our duty to the revolution, which is a wonderful, wonderful way of cleansing the minds of people. we have too many of his admirers in positions of power in Europe today.
Of course. I mean, here's the difference between American governance and okay, we're finding out that Democrats have much more in common with Western Europeans than they do with traditional Americans. But
Yes.
the American ideal of governance is that it's benign. And the Western Europeans don't believe in a benign governance. Um, the UK, the Metropolitan Police just signed off on what they call a policy of positive discrimination, meaning they're not going to be hiring white males for the foreseeable future. It's called positive discrimination. So that's something along the order of positive armed robbery.
No, that is positive discrimination means discrimination against whites.
Exactly,
Everything else is bullshit.
exactly, and it's discrimination is discrimination. There's no such thing as
Yeah.
positive discrimination.
Oh, reverse racism. No, it's racism. There is no
Yeah,
reverse anything.
yeah, and here they are coming out and saying it, and what are they getting applaud? Are they applause? Are they getting complaints? Are people horrified? I don't know. I have no idea.
My friends are horrified, but then again, I do not befriend collectivist task force.
Yeah, the UK is committing the longest national suicide on record, and they're not done yet. Apparently, positive discrimination. So the way they handle their violent crime is the way California does. You just stop reporting it, and that means, hey, it didn't happen.
Yep. If you didn't see it written on a newspaper, it didn't happen.
Yep.
Of course, by the time you realize it did happen, it's too fucking late.
Well, we've seen that okay, when confronted with something, with somebody, with something such as Trump's tariff policies and a person such as Trump, they cave. They say we will never, and then the day later they come back. Gretchen Whitmer went to the White House to kiss the ring.
Yeah, she wanted to go to the blowjob room, but wasn't allowed.
Well, again, the only thing these people understand is force, and I have no problem, forcing people to do what is going to be better for all of us. And especially given the record of Democrats in this country that's still being uncovered. I saw Musk discovered 154 million has been in unemployment payouts have been given to infants, unemployed infants.
I'm sure that if you look hard enough, you're going to find some dearly departed in that list too.
Oh yeah, well, remember we had the 359-year-old on the Social Security rolls.
Amazing, isn't it?
How
old is Social Security?
Social
90
Security,
years old, 80 years old?
I think it started under
in the 30s under Roosevelt. Somewhere around 90 years old, give or take.
Yeah.
So and a bunch of people didn't actually join Social Security. There were a shit ton of people without a Social Security number all the way to the fucking 80s.
1935.
There you go. It's going to be 90 years this year.
Yeah.
Look at that. I hit it on the nose. I didn't even know.
Yep.
I remember in the 80s, not everybody had a Social Security number or was expected to.
Mm-hmm.
And until some legislation started requiring Social Security numbers for employment to curb the employment of illegals and all that jazz. Uh, People who did not want to participate didn't have to and didn't do it. So, how come we have people who are 100 years old getting social security payments? That's bullshit.
Why? All the companies and corporations I worked for were foreign. I worked overseas. And then when I came here, I started working for my parents.
So you didn't participate for a long time.
Well, I kept getting these documents that were requesting I sign up for Social Security, and I never did because, I mean, I hadn't worked in the United States for anybody except my parents, and eventually they stopped sending them. But I was so in the mid '90s, they told me I was eligible for Social Security, and I couldn't see the reason why, because I'd worked for only foreign companies in foreign countries, and
because you had no income in their system.
I had no exactly. So I didn't sign up for it because I didn't deserve it. I hadn't. There were more deserving people who'd actually put in the work. My father, after my father died, like one of my father's hobbies was fighting the Social Security system over amounts such as $1.35, that sort of thing. So he would get checks for $1.35 because they'd messed up something and they were $1.35 short. So he would send these long letters, and he kept copies of all his correspondence with the Social Security Administration. There were like five or six or seven binders. It was a stack of paper about this thick of his fights with the Social Security Administration. I think over the years, I think he got about less than $100 back from the Social Security Administration that they'd shortchanged him.
I see in the chat a lot of people. My dad helped me fill out the forms when I was 7. I did this, I did that. I got my Social Security card when I was 22 or 23. When I went to work for Arrow Air, because Arrow required a Social Security number as part of the new laws. And I remember I had to go to a Social Security office in Manhattan. Boy, that was an experience. And but before that, I didn't have it. I didn't need it. My student card at NYU has my picture, my name, and number 000000000. Because that year they had started using the Social Security number as a student number.
Holy shit! So your Social Security number was on your student card?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
And except that I didn't have a Social Security number. So I go to get my card, and they had this this place in campus that you went to get your card with all of your receipts from tuition and all that jazz. And it says your Social Security number. I don't have one. What do you mean you don't have one? I don't have one. I don't need one. I don't have one. So there, I don't have one. Find something else. The gal doing this couldn't understand the concept. So finally, another one came up from the back and says, "What do you think, that people are born with a Social Security number? He doesn't have one. He doesn't need one. Just issue the goddamn card." And my card had all zeros for a number. And I have it in Virginia still. So if you want, I'll show you next time. Weird shit. Next time I'm in Virginia, of course. The other thing that I noticed is that when my children were born, they were issued a social security number at birth.
Yeah, I have a social security card. I'll be 63 in August, and I have an original social security card that goes back, I think, almost till birth. And when I had to prove my identity to the IRS, I had to go down to the LA office downtown. They instructed me to bring my birth certificate, my original birth certificate, and my original social security card.
Mm-hmm.
And I have them both. But it was just, it was really funny. They never told me why I had to prove my identity. And then, we're finding out the wholesale identity fraud that
Yeah.
was abetted by the Biden administration, and I'm sure the Obama administration as well.
Yeah. What you don't know is how many Thomas Winters were asking for a refund.
Well, this is the thing that I went down there and I had the foresight to take with me the letter that I had that had listed my requirements. And when I went down there, they said I had the wrong documentation. So I showed them the letter I'd been sent, and they said, "Well, they have it wrong. You need to bring in this, this, and this." So instead of getting into a huge fight, I made an appointment for a week later, and I went back a week later with their little documents, and I got to see the same little drone, and she was happy. Um, and nobody ever told me what it was. I asked her. I said, why did this happen? And she said she didn't know. It was handled by a different office. So, and I said, can you look it up? She said, no, I don't have access to those records. So it was like, aren't you embarrassed? Um, I didn't say that, but I had this whole fantasy conversation in my head. Aren't you embarrassed? I mean, look what you did to me. And I had to sit, I arrived on time and I had to wait 2 hours wearing a mask. That was
Mm.
almost the only time I ever wore, that was the only time I ever wore a mask for a prolonged time during the whole COVID nightmare. And by the end of it, I was like, I was short on oxygen. I was the only guy in the waiting room. There was nobody ahead of me. But it had to do with the whole being debanked and harassed and all of that. And I don't know. I think they thought I was going to give up, or I was going to have a stroke, or cry and beg for mercy.
I don't know what's in their heads. If anything at all. Speaking of debanked, funny you should mention that. Let because there's a bunch of people I notified everybody during the yapping on Thursday. But of course, we have a lot of people who watch this program and not the other one. So I'm gonna see if I can uh, make a very short recollection of this. Um, last last week during one of our shows, and people tried to tip us on the chat and all that jazz, and couldn't do it. So as soon as the program was over, I go into Odyssey, the platform, and Odyssey says everything is okay. You have an account already connected, but it's not receiving money. So I follow the trail into Skype, and I spend hours with Skype. I went to sleep at 6 a.m. that night. Hours with Skype, but nobody can find what's wrong with my account until they say, well, we're going to have to escalate it to a supervisor, and you will get an email tomorrow with the. And by the way, I think by now they knew, but they didn't want to say it, so we're going to send you an email. And sure enough, the next day, I get this shit. Let me see if I can help you read this. Hi there. By the way, don't you like, the formal commercial communication?
Hmm.
If I had done this at NYU in my course for business English, I think they would have flanked me and sent me back to kindergarten. Hi there. Thank you for reaching out to us. We understand your concern, but are obligated to impose strict limits on the types of businesses we can and can't support. We are unable to work with any business that we believe poses an elevated financial risk or violates our own policies.
Hmm.
Eh, As you will see in a moment, not only did we not violate any policy or pose any kind of financial risk, the reason was completely different, but these chicken shit Irish socialists were too ashamed to actually say. Kindly note, kindly mind you,
Hmm.
we cannot disclose our internal process for determining risk factors associated with businesses. Meaning, we're not gonna fucking tell you why.
Hmm.
After doing a lot of digging, I hope next time they do a lot of digging is their own graves, we were able to find that your account has been closed. How much do you have to dig to find out my account is being closed, asshole? We have come to the conclusion that there is no way to reopen said account. Please note, we're not holding any funds in your account and there is nothing left to pay out. We apologize for the inconvenience caused and very sorry that we cannot be of more help, which is all bullshit and
Hmm.
quite uh, false. Thanks, the Stripe team. The next day, I was going to call Stripe, not Stripe, Odyssey, to find out if they knew. And before I could, just about an hour or two after I received the stupid letter, I got a letter from Odyssey that they've been trying to step away from Stripe into a different system because Stripe had requested that Odyssey provide them access to all accounts in the system so that they can close accounts at will.
Hmm.
And Odyssey said, no, if you have a problem with that account, you let us know, we do it. And that discussion led into a fuck you, the horse you came in. And Stripe is developing a different form of payment processing. And they had an agreement with Stripe that Stripe would remain in force until the end of April, so that on May 1st, Odyssey could uh, switch. And even Stripe was supposed to help in the transition to ensure that the new system worked. But out of the blue, they decided to pull the plug. And they didn't pull the plug on us, they pulled the plug on Odyssey and left all of the accounts without service. Isn't that lovely?
Hmm.
Now, I understand there are some accounts in Odyssey that I don't like, some that give me the jiffies, really. But that's not the point. Don't service those accounts if you don't feel like you want to. I believe in freedom both ways. But what they did is create a shitload of problems for a lot of people, including us. So I've been uh, the proclamation over there says F Stripe. Yes, indeed, but you have to say it in Gaelic, my friend. And until this matter is resolved, our way of receiving support from our viewers, which is the only thing that we use to finance ourselves, we're not getting money from USAID or any NGO or any or Soros or any other of those people who are giving away fucking millions. Uh, we survive exclusively on the generosity of our viewers. So now there are two ways only until this is resolved. One is to make a contribution at quadverum.com/support us. It could be a single payment or a monthly contribution, and you can do these in lieu of tips or super chats. And the other way, for those watching us on X, is to subscribe to at the Radilai on X. It's only $5 per month, but $5 per month, if enough people do it, can go a long way towards keeping all of these running. So there you go. You're going to be seeing this sporadically come up, but what can I say? I don't want to make everybody's life more difficult, but now supporting us is 2 clicks away instead of one, and I would very much appreciate that. And many have responded very, very generously. So thank you to all who have, and thank you to all who will. There you go. I had to say that. Um, so there are no problems accessing Odyssey, and for people who are members of the channel, uh, their membership is still active. We're not receiving any money for that, and you will not be charged in your credit cards. But we will keep the membership active, and we will keep doing our members-only programs until this is resolved. Ain't that lovely? Don't you love socialists in charge of financial companies?
Well, it's the Irish, so I'm
That's
sure.
what I said when I found out. Yeah.
Yeah, no, they saw your yarmulke and they said, we can't have that.
Ah! Get rid of the Jew!
Yep.
By the way, for those who cannot see it, there you go. I promised I was going to wear the yarmulke on every single broadcast until Israel erased Hamas from the map. And I hope it's not for life, but that
Well,
would be very bad news indeed for a lot of people.
yesterday or today, Hamas complained that having them on a terrorist watch, having them on a state list of terrorist organizations is a violation of their human rights.
They have no human rights because they're not human.
Well, this is the thing. These are the people that did what they did on October 7th. And
When you put 3-month-old babies in ovens, when you take a 9-month-old baby, twist their head around, and then start beating him with a 2x4 to pretend he died in a kind of demolition, you have no claim to humanity.
yeah, I mean, this is why, okay, Jerry Seinfeld was walking somewhere and somebody screeched at him, about Palestinians. What about the Palestinians? And he said, I don't care about Palestinians. And I mean, I'd be lying if I said, I care about the fate of the Palestinians. I don't.
No, I did once.
Yeah, so did I.
I
So did
did
I.
once. I don't. I don't think I ever will again. Because when I just told you those who do that lose any claim to humanity, those who support them, those who feed and house them, those who hide them, those who make their life easier and procure food and facilitate their homes as entrances to tunnels are the same.
Mhm.
The doctors who use the hospitals as fronts for their weapon storage, they're all the same.
Well,
I don't care anymore.
they've been having these anti-Hamas marches. One of the organizers of the marches was just dumped on his family's front door, having been tortured to death in some of the most unimaginable ways.
Yes.
That's Hamas, and
Yeah. Who obviously don't give a shit about Palestinian life either.
Well, this is the thing that these are the most benighted people in history because they screw themselves. There's some famous quote that they never miss an opportunity to lose or something like that. They never miss an opportunity to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, and it's true.
True.
I was on the edge, in 2014 when I started learning about families agreeing to sacrifice an individual child in exchange for cash payments, and then the rationale was that the child was now a martyr in paradise, and it's like, well, okay, the child's martyrdom, they hooked him up to a car battery and electrocuted him to death, and then they cut him to pieces. I'm sure if you ask the kid, would you rather be would you rather go through that in order to be a martyr in paradise, or would you rather stay here on Earth and be alive?
I want 20% of that check and fuck you all.
Yeah, well, it's entire families were. I'll never forget the 4 Bakr boys who were allegedly killed by the Israelis on the beach, and then there were these 4 other boys who ran from the scene, and one of them had a broken arm. And after he had his arm put in a cast, they interviewed him. And this was a little boy, and he was the most cold-eyed professional I'd ever seen in my life. And they were after he gave his little interview where he was like, "Kill the Jews," they were panning around his entire family of 500 children or whatever. And he was just watching the camera with his little cold eyes just going back and forth like that. And I thought, holy shit, this guy was in on it. They broke his arm with like a baseball bat or something, and he was down with it, And that really, I really started changing my views of the Palestinians. I was never opposed to Israeli operations because I knew that the Israelis operated under the most stringent rules of engagement on the face of the earth. But I cared about the ultimate fate of the Palestinians. And I would be lying if I say I care about it now, because I don't.
I'll tell you outright, I don't give a shit. As far as I'm concerned, they should go in there, plow that land, and start anew. And what do you do with the people who are there? Get them the fuck out of there or bury them in there? I don't care. There are over 30 million refugees in Africa living in tents in Tanzania, in Sudan, in Congo, in Chad, in Nigeria. 30 fucking million. Where are the bleeding hearts for them?
Well, they're black.
Where are the NGOs? Where are the commissions on human rights? Where are the... Fuck them all. They're liars. They're hypocrites. And they're positively, absolutely fucking evil.
Here, let me show you something or tell you something. I never use Google AI because Google AI is always wrong. I looked up total number world refugees.
70 million.
Google AI says it's 44 million. The UNHCR says it's 127 million.
Oh, God.
So there's just a slight discrepancy between Google AR and the UNHCR.
Well, define refugee.
Exactly. Okay. The number of people forcibly displaced is now over 123 million.
Yeah. But not all of them are refugees. Those who resettle in another country, people who get to the U.S., get a residence permit, are no longer refugees.
Okay, you're right.
eh. Those who are in refugee camps in Turkey waiting to get back to Syria, those are refugees.
True.
eh. The 6 million Ukrainians living in Poland and Romania waiting to get back to Ukraine, those are refugees.
Hmm.
By the way, when was the last time you saw a headline about them?
Nobody cares because
They're white.
they're
They're
white.
white, blue-eyed, and some of the women have nice tits. Therefore,
They're
they
white.
cannot be refugees.
And Trump is now involved in this. So since it appears that Trump is actually being effective at helping pound the hell out of the Russians so that they'll stop, the press has to stop talking about it.
Yeah.
I told you I watched a clip from an MSNBC show. I didn't recognize the anchor. It was a woman, of course. And she said to her guests, as you know, we're very careful about not playing any clips from Donald Trump. And it was like, why? You call yourself a news organization. Why are you opposed to playing Trump in his own words? And then she explained why by saying that Trump had recently announced that the protests against Tesla are illegal. And
no
what do you
shit,
think about that?
Charlie.
Well, what they were trying to get across is that Trump said that marching in the street peacefully with a flag is illegal. And what Trump was talking about is firebombing Tesla dealerships.
Oh, in Molotovs?
Exactly. Machine gunning Tesla dealerships.
Destroying property otherwise, even if it is keying a car?
Yeah. No, and she had this, after she said that, she looked at the camera with this, what I can only describe as a sheepish expression, as if she had been forced to say this by the company for which she works. And I just thought, who watches this? Well, the answer is about what? 400,000 people in the United States?
How the hell can they survive?
Well, they're not going to. All these media outlets are going to go down the drain once their money sources from the feds is cut off.
Yeah. And by the way, everybody says we've cut off, the NGOs are dead. No, baby, we started cutting off. We cut off less than 10% so far.
Yeah. No, it's going to take a while, but
I'm not going to be like the fucking Houthis. It takes time.
Yeah.
2 of the people who attacked Tesla dealerships are already in jail awaiting trial.
Mm-hmm.
They've already been arraigned.
Mm-hmm.
Did you read about that?
No, of course not.
And unless you start following the Department of Justice's website, they have a list of the cases being filed. Unless you start looking into that, you'll never find out.
No, and okay, now let's see, Chuck Todd. Who's the other one? the CNN fucker who claims he's not leftist.
Jake Tapper.
Jake Tapper. Have you noticed that Jake Tapper has started wearing glasses?
Yeah, amazing. He
Yeah,
wants to look more intellectual now.
They're all doing it, but Jake Tapper wrote a book about the media hiding the fact that Biden is senile, and he wrote it as if he had nothing to do with any of it.
For 4 years, he was a willing participant in the deception.
Yeah, and they have clips of him. They have clips of him saying this. Chuck Todd also.
If I recall, there was one time that Jake Tapper said that he had interviewed Biden, and he was more lucid than he had ever seen him. Which, by the way, it wouldn't be too difficult because Biden was always an idiot. But more lucid than he had ever seen him, perfectly in control of facts and information. I don't know why people say he has a problem.
Yeah, and Okay, Chuck Todd was fired, so now Chuck Todd is spilling the beans on something that he himself also took part in and pretending that he had nothing to do with it. And it's amazing that these people demand respect. They 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 demand they demand that we treat them as if they are the people they're pretending to be, and they're not the people who we can see they are quite easily.
No. Look at this from the chat, because we've already established that there are millions of Ukrainian refugees, but nobody writes about them or talks about them. There are 40 million, 30 million plus refugees in Africa, and nobody gives living in tents, and nobody gives a fuck about them. But Adam Schiff said Trump should be investigated for benefiting from market manipulation.
He should be for what?
Market manipulation, for being like Nancy Pelosi.
How did oh that the
How is that? When he announced that um, he was pulling back on sanctions, we need to say something about that too. The markets rose, so he was manipulating the markets, and he surely profited, even though Trump doesn't trade a single fucking share. But the thing is that 3 hours before he made the announcement, he tweeted, "It's time to buy now." What kind of market manipulator tells everybody what's going to happen?
Well, I mean, this is Adam Schiff we're talking about.
I know, but that one is repeated by the press ad fucking nauseam. And all of these talking heads on TV are talking about nothing else. Now, if Trump wanted to manipulate the market to enrich himself, he does not tell you 3 hours later so that you can buy ahead of him.
You said we need to talk about the sanctions relief.
Yeah, the sanctions relief, because everybody's saying how Trump went back, how he surrendered, and the markets were collapsing, so he surrendered and
Oh,
pulled
you mean
back.
sanctions or tariff?
Sanctions
or tariff?
Tariffs. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
And what they forget is Trump starts with nothing. Then he applies tariffs from 10% to everybody and their mothers, and 30% for that one, and 80% to that one, and everybody goes crazy. And 2 weeks later, he says, "Okay, I'm going to suspend the reciprocal tariffs, but the 10% stays. China gets a new asshole, and there are 90 countries wanting to sign a zero tariff agreement with us." So we end up having a 10% tariff on the entire fucking planet that everybody was screaming bloody murder about, but now nobody complains about anymore. China has got tariffs up the wazoo, and it's not just a 125. It's actually 145, and plus all the shit that he dumped on the delivery companies like Alibaba and Temu, which not only will have to pay tariffs now, but will also have to pay $70 per package and 150 starting June 1st. Yeah, pada. You know what that spells? This is the volume of sales of those assholes to the US starting now. And they call that a defeat. The way I look at it, he got what he wanted.
Well, he got what he wanted, and he got it fast.
Yeah, in 2 weeks.
For whatever reason, after Trump has been in politics in an active way for 10 years now. And for whatever reason, people don't understand that when Trump starts out, he says, "Okay, I'm going to come to your house and I'm going to burn it to the ground. That's my opening position." And you say, "Holy shit, don't burn my house down to the ground." He says, okay, then how about you stop, give me a zero tariff deal. And you go, yeah, I'll do that. That's how Trump makes his deal.
Yes.
His opening salvo is that, I'm going to burn your house to the ground. He's always done this. He's always done this. He's done this.
And it's very simple. The big threat over there, and nobody complains about this. Okay, it wasn't a baseball. It was a broomstick up their ass.
Yeah.
And every country in the world is paying 10%. 90 countries, which is all that counts, because who gives a flying fart if Madagascar is not part of the deal?
Well, also remember they tried to make a big news story out of, he put tariffs on an island of penguins.
Yes, and that was a very good move. And only these fucking idiots who know zero about international trade can laugh at it. Even that is a possibility. Many years ago, I had an uncle who was one of the biggest sons of bitches that ever walked this planet. And he had a humongous textile factory, the one that my grandfather built, and he managed to screw my mother out of. And a government in Argentina had declared an area of the province of San Luis, which is like a poor state with shit for anything, a tax-free zone. So if you manufactured in that area, everything you manufacture in that area would be tax-free. And you could sell it throughout the country without paying any taxes on it. So my uncle immediately registered a branch of the company in St. Louis with facilities over there. The facilities were a doghouse and a garbage bin. But he had an address. So he continued to manufacture at the same place he always had in the city of Rosario in Argentina. And at the last moment would stick a label made in San Luis. And then ship it all around. And the paperwork would say that it originated in San Luis, and he would pay no taxes.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to evade thousands of millions of dollars in taxes, he had to pay $1,000 a month to keep an address in San Luis. When Russia cannot export to Germany, they export to Waziristan. And all of a sudden, Waziristan straight to Germany goes from nothing to $5 billion per month.
Mm-hmm.
When the Chinese cannot export to the US because Trump or Biden put tariffs on them, they do it through fucking Vietnam. Or through an island with penguins.
Mm-hmm.
As long as that island is an independent jurisdiction, any products that are said to come from that island pay taxes too, or tariffs.
Mm-hmm.
That's what people don't understand. What Trump did was close every freaking loophole.
Mm-hmm.
And no, you cannot transship. Since every country is paying, you cannot transship through another country because you're still paying.
Mm-hmm.
And if we have a one-on-one agreement with these 90 countries for zero tariffs, a condition for the maintenance of that agreement would be that that country takes measures to avoid transshipments through it. Because if you do, you get slapped the same tariffs of the country that used your port. There's nothing stupid about this.
No, I mean, Trump isn't stupid. Biden was stupid. Obama was functionally stupid. He's a natively intelligent man, but he was functionally stupid. His ideology made him a very stupid man functionally. So, Trump is not stupid. He's natively intelligent, but he's also intelligent in this world. He's actively intelligent. And They've always done this. Reagan was stupid. George W. Bush was
Oh
stupid.
yeah.
Hillary.
God,
Hillary is
Jerry Ford.
Hillary. Yeah, exactly. Ford is stupid. Hillary is the smartest woman in the world. It's like, okay, give me some evidence of that. Give me some evidence of that.
Oh, you devious Trumper, you! How dare you ask for evidence?
Yeah.
You have to take it on faith. You have to take it on faith.
In the 90s, they started making movies about a blonde female president, and she had she always wore pantsuits. And
Oh
it's like
yes.
every movie had a blonde female president in pantsuits. I was just like,
Yep. I saw that one. Then there was a TV series that picked up on this and had like 3 or 4 seasons of a pantsuited blonde. By the way, uh, I think that for plausible deniability, they made her thin and fit.
hmm.
Because no, how dare you claim that we're saying this is Hillary? Hillary's a blob. This one actually looks normal. Um, Jimmy Carter was sold to us as a great president and a very intelligent man. He had the intelligence of a fucking peanut. How about, and by the way, some were intelligent, but not in the normal way. They were more clever than intelligent, like Johnson.
Hmm.
Eh? Um,
Johnson was a very street smart thug, and
yes,
it's
he
funny
was
that
clever. He wasn't intelligent.
what's that?
He was clever, not
Hmm.
intelligent. He had street smarts.
Hmm.
Mhm. And how about, God, Roosevelt unfortunately was intelligent. That's why he fucked us for a century. But when you think of it, yeah, no. And Nixon, they didn't say he wasn't intelligent, but he said he was a crook. And frankly, he wasn't.
No. What's really interesting about Nixon? Everybody who knew him said that he was terrified of extemporaneously speaking. And yet Nixon was personally responsible for the most incredible extemporized speech, the kitchen debates with Khrushchev, where Nixon was in the Soviet Union, and he was standing in front of an audience of Soviets, and he had this extremely friendly yet frank debate with Khrushchev. And the Soviet technology was so horrible that they had to use like military level spotlights to shine on them, which made them very hot. And Khrushchev was wearing like a cowboy hat to keep the lights out of his eyes. And Nixon, who hated speaking, who was terrified of making a fool out of himself, performed this stunning. Everybody talks about Nixon opening up the way to China.
Yeah.
But the kitchen debates with Khrushchev, if you actually watch them, you would have no idea that these two countries were mortal enemies. You absolutely had no idea, because both men were almost teasing each other. The interpreters were laughing, and it was stunning. Nixon gets a terrible rap. He was an idiot for trying to cover up Watergate. He should have just let the dice fall where they may. He trusted people who were going to turn against him.
He was the first victim of lawfare
Exactly.
in modern times.
Yeah.
His problem was, and you just said the key, nothing would have happened to Nixon.
Mhm.
Like nothing happened with Clinton, like nothing happened with Trump. but for the Republicans deserting him.
Mm-hmm.
Some Republicans, you know, the Ross Perot's and Rand Pauls of this world, never forgave him for that trip to China.
Mm-hmm.
And when the Democrats began their bullshit campaign against him, months literally after he won in a landslide the biggest fucking election in the history of this country, they deserted him.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, impeachment became a possibility because the Republicans in the Senate were one after another deserting him and switching to the Democrat side. Not by changing parties, but by proclaiming that they would impeach him.
Yeah. And it makes no sense.
No, there was no crime. There was no impeachable offense.
What Trump is showing us is that the press and the Democrats are much weaker than paper tigers. That despite everything the press is throwing at him, like every day, every time I speak to you, you tell me something that I didn't know. And the reason I didn't know it is because I don't give a shit what the press says. And it's having no impact on his popularity. And he's timing everything out in such a way that when he announces that, you know, people who make less than $150,000 a year will pay no taxes, like you said, there goes his.
Oh, it goes like a rocket. Um, I'm looking at a couple of things in the chat on China. O'Leary, along with Joshua Philip, has said that China never played by the rules. They insist other countries should, including the United States. They also steal technology and intelligence, bad actors. We've been saying that ever since we started talking with Thomas. China never played by the rules. I've said a gazillion times China should have never been allowed into the World Trade Organization. That is Clinton's doing and is the most harmful thing that cocksucker ever did to anyone, anything, or any country. It's the most harmful thing a US president could have done. And China immediately began to wipe its ass with World Trade Organization rules. During the Bush administration, one of the biggest problems we had was China's manipulation of the yuan, which led to China flooding markets, including the US, with steel and aluminum. And by the way, pronunciation wise, aluminium, I don't know, both are correct. And practically decimated our industry and Europe's industry. And it wasn't for Trump, we wouldn't even have any industry in steel and aluminum today.
Well, people need to understand something about the Chinese. Currently, China is ruled by the Han Chinese, who are an ethnic group. And the word for China translates as Middle Kingdom, which is they are between heaven and earth. They are superior to all other earthlings, and they were only one step down from paradise. And this is how they view themselves. And it's a human frailty that whenever people view themselves as being superior, they always mistreat those who they view as their inferiors. Rather than trying to help their inferiors, they mistreat them.
They stomp on them.
They stomp on them. And that is what the Chinese do. The Chinese have built into their culture the notion that they are ethnically and they are racially superior to the rest of the world. And the fact that the Chinese have never, ever, ever in their entire history been able to back up their racist superiority with accomplishments, it rubs them the wrong way. And
Yeah.
okay, the People's Liberation
And of course, now they're telling you how they're a 3,000-year-old civilization. Bullshit.
No, no, they're certainly not.
They're not even 200 years old. And they put together the rule by Genghis Khan and the Mongols
Yeah,
with the
exactly.
Ming dynasty, with the thing. Different peoples have ruled at different times. They are all the same thing. Bullshit.
Okay, I study World War One, and in 1917, the Beyond government of China joined the Allies, but it didn't matter. They had no army. China was in the midst of a civil war. They had warlords, and the
Mhm.
warlord period lasted until 1949 when the communists took over.
Yes.
And okay, Chiang Kai-shek was in charge of the Kuomintang. That was the political
Kuomintang. Yep. Those are the
party.
ones who ended up in Taiwan.
They ended up in Taiwan, and basically there was no difference in the way these guys operated. Um, the Taiwanese of today are completely different from the Taiwanese of 1949. But the Chinese are turning back to Mao. They're threatening us with Mao, and it's like, go ahead. I mean, start wearing your stupid Mao outfits again. Who cares?
The great leap backwards.
Yes.
This is the great leap backwards. And by the way, when you mentioned these two, and the emperor was in Manchuria, and the Manchurians do not consider themselves Chinese any more than the Hong Kongese or the Cantonese. And of course, Tibet never saw itself as a part of China. And China has always been like 5 or 6 different nations and different countries.
Yeah.
And the communists managed to step in, on everybody's neck in a way that not even the English did.
No. No.
And sooner or later that powder keg is going to blow up. And for one, I'm not going to be sorry when it does. Somebody
Chinese,
says here, hold on.
before
Somebody says here, oh yeah,
before you just get into that, in terms of powder kegs, the Chinese put down by force around 18,000 uprisings per year.
yeah,
Think about that. Okay.
millions of death every
Yes.
year. And no, I was completing the idea. They said that economist Art Laffer, like Truman, I wish somebody sent me a one-handed economist. Um, Later has been saying that we need to be more friendly with China.
No, we don't.
No, we don't. We need to stump them. We need to stump on them like a fucking cockroach.
The
We
Chinese
don't need 125% tariffs. We need 600% tariffs.
the Chinese government hates us. They are doing everything in their power to destroy the United States.
Yes, and if given a chance, they will.
The Chinese have secret police headquarters in this country, secret police
Yes.
stations where they abuse Chinese citizens who are in this country and they force them into espionage. They beat them, they rape them, they do horrible things to them and force them to do things against their will. So
Each and every one of the 300,000 Chinese students in this country has to be debriefed for intelligence purposes the moment they step back in China.
Exactly. The only Chinese who are
Take them all out.
The only Chinese who are safe in this country are those who become Americans. And even among them, there are people who are still loyal to the old country.
Oh, a shitload. And even those who weren't may only need only spend a couple of days at a Confucius Institute with one of these nice guys from the Secret Services. And all of a sudden, they're going to remember how Chinese they are and how being an American is not that important.
Yeah. They all have family back home. And those families,
Yes.
the Chinese government will put those families nuts in a vice and say, you do what we want, or we're going to turn the handle on the vice and crush grandpa's nuts. And,
Yes.
the Chinese the Chinese communists are responsible for, conservatively speaking, about 120 million deaths.
Yeah.
They've committed genocide after genocide against their own people. We don't need to be nicer to them. We need to let them know. We don't have to do it publicly. We can do it behind the scenes. We need to let them know that they don't hold a candle to us, and that they basically need to fuck off. And if they don't fuck off, then we will help the Taiwanese and the Japanese pound them into the mire at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
And
it's not going to take much.
No, I mean, the Japanese have done everything in their power to circumvent their own constitution. So the Japanese, by their constitution, claims that their armed forces must have no offensive military capabilities.
Yep.
They got around
that on them.
Well, they got around that by saying the greatest defense is a good offense. So
Yep.
The Japanese have every offensive weapon you can imagine.
Yes, and since we imposed the clause on them, as long as we are okay with it, no problem, baby.
Well, exactly. I'm not telling East Asia to forget what the Imperial Japanese did, but the Japanese of today are so far from being Imperial Japanese that holding today's Japanese responsible for the crimes of the Imperial Japanese is nonsensical.
Yes.
On the other hand, the Chinese communists of today are exactly the same people who they were in 1940.
Who have been committing all the crimes since 49 and before.
Exactly. So yeah. The Chinese communists of today are the ones responsible for Tiananmen Square. And
for Tiananmen Square, for the Cultural Revolution.
Yes.
Where kids ate their parents.
Yes. And human corpses were sold in butcher shops. So, but okay, back to Tiananmen Square. It wasn't the students who were murdered by the government. It was the people of Beijing who tried to prevent the troops from going in there. So what the Chinese government ordered was that anti-aircraft cannons be brought in and be leveled down horizontally, and they shot their way through crowds of civilians, killing at least 5,000 of them.
Yeah.
Okay. Beijing was covered with human body parts as far as the eye could see, and they covered it up with the complicity of the Western press. And,
yes.
and there is footage. If you look very hard, you can find footage. But those are the same people who did that who are in power today.
Yes.
And even some of the same individuals who were involved in that.
Yes.
So we should not be nice.
Look at me. I have absolutely no quarrel with anything you're saying because it's absolutely exact. Io is telling me President Trump is older than modern China. It's true.
Yeah, it's true.
Like Europe, the land is old and contains all things, but the country is not. Absolutely true. China today started in 1949. Anybody born before 1949 is older than fucking China. Because what was before that, it was a completely different thing. It was a completely different bird.
Well, okay.
Have you heard? And there is one more thing that somebody said here. Hold on, just give me just 1 second. I saw one here that made me laugh, but now I can't find it.
Okay.
Oh well, never mind.
You've heard of the pliable Chinese mummies, right? They found them in boxes of goo or liquid or something, and they're thousands of years old, but you can still move them around. They're not stiff, they're not rigid. These were found in the 70s. So there is extensive newsreel footage of Chinese scientists gathered to study these mummies, and they're all wearing Mao suits, complete with cap. It's the stupidest thing you've ever seen. That they're promoting their scientific prowess to the world, and they're all wearing the same outfit that it was basically ordered by the nutcase in charge. And that's all I saw. I wasn't watching what they were doing to the mummy, and I wasn't watching the equipment they were using.
These are the same people.
Over the fact that they were all wearing Mao suits like idiots.
These are the same assholes who tried to convince you that they could do open heart surgery with the patient awake using acupuncture.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that for a second.
Sure.
These are the same people who told you that they could cure pancreatic cancer by massaging feet.
Mm-hmm.
These were all campaigns done by the Chinese government through propaganda in the 60s and 70s. Now, the truth is they did not have medicine at all. Whatever they can do in hospitals in China today, they owe to contact with the West.
Sure.
And their students learning medicine at Johns Hopkins. Because what they had was witch doctor in the jungles of Congo level.
Yeah. In traditional Chinese medicine, you have 17 pulses, and the witch doctor reads your pulse, and he says, I think you need dried seahorse that's all ground up, and I'll grind it up for you in my mortar and pestle, and this will cure your ovarian cancer, which I diagnosed by putting my finger on your 17 wrist pulses.
Fucking Chinese hunted the rhinos to the edge of extinction. Because apparently the ground horn or ground penis can cure something or another.
It's an aphrodisiac, because apparently Chinese men have a hell of a time getting it up. They have to eat like rhino horn in order to get it up.
If you spent your life eating rice and hiding from the secret police, you couldn't get it up. If you ate a whole bottle of Viagra.
Well, the Chinese showed their true colors during the COVID nightmare, where they sealed everybody in Shanghai in their skyscrapers, and they wouldn't let them come out and shop for food. And there were videos taken by people in Shanghai at night of entire skyscrapers of people screaming. It was surreal. And this is China. This is a real country.
Yeah, because they didn't get their spring roll that night.
They welded people into their apartment buildings. They welded the doors shut.
Yeah. You gotta be kidding me. You know, it's and they're warning now that their economy is doing great, and everybody who tells you not is lying to you. Yeah. Whatever you want, have fun with your rice patties, because you're going back to subsistence farming, you fucker. And by the way, that would be my plan with China.
Oh, sure.
Cut out, no, tariffs, okay, but you know what is better? Cut out all trade relations with them.
I watch a lot of Korean cinema, movies and limited series. They're all Netflix productions. There are Chinese and Japanese productions, and they're not the same. The Chinese are probably the worst because it's impossible for the actors to feign emotion. What makes the Korean series really interesting is that Koreans are known as the Irishmen of Asia because they're very emotive. They
emote a lot.
Exactly. and they have no problem. They're not embarrassed by yelling and speaking their mind. And the Japanese series, the Japanese find it very difficult to express emotion openly, and so it's reflected in their series. And okay, in World War II, Admiral Yamamoto was the guy behind Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
And there's a Japanese movie called The Death of Yamamoto, and he gets shot down. Yamamoto was shot down by American aircraft that the pilot Charles Lindbergh had showed them how they could double the range of their aircraft by just putting the engines at a certain setting. And the Japanese were sure that Yamamoto was out of range of all American aircraft, so they jumped him and shot him down. And in the movie, he's sitting with his samurai sword between his knees, and he looks out and he sees the planes, and he just stares forward. And the camera gradually zooms in, and you see blood running down his shirt. He's been shot. And he's just like this, and the wing comes off, and it goes into the ground, and we cut back into the aircraft, and he's just, and that's considered very moving to Japanese people.
Right.
Culturally, he's showing no emotion whatsoever. And in Korean cinema, I just watched I would recommend this to everybody who has.
I imagine that fills the Japanese with admiration.
Exactly. That's it. That
Right, because the ability to keep your passions completely subdued
exactly.
as you do your duty is what you see. The emotions are there; they're just not easy to recognize for us.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying the Japanese are human beings with all the human emotion, but
Yes,
it's not shown.
but the language of emotion is different.
Absolutely. I just watched a brilliant Korean series called Karma, and it's about a handful of people, each who make terrible decisions, and gradually, as the story expands, it's only six 1-hour episodes. These people, their lives intertwine, and it's all about, if you're a bad person, then karma will get you in the end. And everybody's yelling his head off as terrible things happen to him, and it's part of the culture, and that's what makes the Korean cinema really interesting to me, is because I really like. I don't like screaming for its own sake. Like, I'm sure you've seen a scene in a Western movie where somebody dies in somebody's arms. And he throws his head back, and he's filmed from above, and he goes, "No!" That scene has been used a billion times.
A gazillion times. But, oh God, nearly all the Westerns had one of those.
Exactly. And you won't see that in Korean cinema. You'll see much more interesting stuff. And okay, Japanese women aren't supposed to emote culturally. In all these series, Korean women are going at it, just, you see fist fights in these movies between men and women. And it's just really, the Koreans are a completely different culture. They do have certain aspects that are common. Like if you were to see traditional Korean clothing, traditional Japanese clothing, traditional Chinese clothing, Han Chinese, you would be hard put to tell any of them apart.
Yeah.
And the Koreans do have rules such as they have formalities where like pouring tea and things like that, where you're supposed to be very formal. But a Korean funeral is a lot more emotive than, say, a Japanese funeral, where, like you said, it's more admirable to keep your emotions to yourself.
They're very British in that respect.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. We're okay.
I grew up in my family. They have this very British approach. I couldn't show emotion
Oh yeah,
until much, much later in life. And I still feel uncomfortable with that.
yeah, yeah.
You will not see me crying in public or in front of other people. And if I do it privately, I won't tell you.
Well, same in my family. Emotions were, I mean, it wasn't allowed. We were ordered to keep silent and keep everything
Yeah.
bottled up.
Smooching in a park? Fuck no.
I didn't even know what that meant. You know,
Eh, Smooching in the park?
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, we when I left my house at 18, I was expelled out into the world, not knowing anything, and I had to figure out everything on my own. And boy, did I make mistakes. uh,
No.
I only finally learned everything that I needed to know to live in this world. It only took me until I was about 50 years old. But when I left my house, I didn't know anything, and I had to figure it all out. And boy, I could entertain people for days with the stories of my mistakes, but I would melt with embarrassment. Like my face would first turn red, and then it would begin melting like wax. Um, I can feel embarrassment very easily. You can't suppress that. I could stand there and say, "What are you looking at?" with my beet red face, sending out
Mm.
waves of
Sending signals all over. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But
Oh, well.
okay, remember way back in the misty plains of time a week ago when they were talking about all our allies with our shared ideals. No such thing.
No, I just said it in DC. We don't have shared values with Europe, and
Shared
Europe
values. That's
has,
that's
has they don't have shared values with each other.
and we don't have shared values with the Chinese by
Oh
none.
God, no. The only thing we share with the Chinese is the white of our eyes.
Exactly. That's it. That's it.
Speaking
We're,
of Europe and all that jazz, another thing that's been pretty funny this week has to do with these people. I'm gonna show you now. Yeah, there we are. Ah, there you go.
Pitufik. Oh.
Down in the center on her knees, she presumably was every time she met Bill Clinton, is the former commander of Pacific Space Base. By the way, I can't help but laugh every time I see Space Force or Space Base, and I think that the commander ought to be called Spacey something. But anyway, this space base thingy, as you well know, J.D. Vance went over there, right?
Hmm?
And he spoke to them. I don't know why, but he felt the need to speak to these
Okay,
foreigners.
just so everybody's sure about this base is in Greenland.
Yes, this is the old fool base that was created in World War II,
Hmm.
and then it became a space base, and they changed the name to Pitufik, which sounds to me like a fucking cartoon, um, because that was the name of the place, or the name the Inuit called the place before the base was built. I would have left Thule, which was incidentally the name of Greenland that the Norse gave to it. It's
Hmm.
more our culture. So Vance goes over there and says that military force is not necessary for the US to expand its presence in Greenland, and that locals will want to choose to align with the US instead of Denmark. I think he was listening to our beer Blather 2 weeks ago when I said the very same thing.
Hmm.
That it was a question of wooing the Greenlanders, and it wasn't so difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Then he said that Denmark hasn't done a good job for the people of Greenland. Well, to the point that the people of Greenland massively voted for independence from Greenland. What the fuck? And the only reason they haven't exercised that option, which they already voted for, is because in so doing they would lose 800 million and they want independence, but they're not stupid. He said that Russia and China are increasing their footprint in the area, and the world cannot bury our heads in the sand, or in this case, in the snow. Did I say anything that even remotely scandalizes you?
No, not me.
No? Well, apparently it scandalized the commanding officer, Susan, whatever the crap, what was her name? Myers, Colonel Susan Myers. And a day after he left the base, she circulated an email to all of the troops and civilian personnel that as long as she has the fortune of being commander in this base, you don't have to worry that the offending statements of that ignorant nincompoop of Vance are not to be considered. And we're going to fly all the flags here, the Greenland flag, the Danish flag, and the American flag. Blah, 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 blah. The next day, she was relieved of command, which is a marked improvement over the last 4 years. Where did she get off? Article 88 of the of the Unified Code of Military Justice is very clear. Officers cannot badmouth the president, the vice president, the secretary of defense, Congress, or the Supreme Court. And if they do, they're subject to up to a year in military prison, demotion, and getting kicked out. So far, she's been demoted. I do hope that Hegseth promotes a court martial and throw an Article 88 on this bitch. Because how can we have? By the way, she called incompetent, inexperienced officials,
Mm-hmm.
and she was referring to the commander in chief.
Yeah. She was a toy soldier. She became a soldier and had no idea what it meant. She's a TikTok soldier. She's okay. I told you there's a series. I don't know if it's a series or a movie. It stars Viola Davis, and Viola Davis has become a social justice activist. She's a middle-aged black woman, and in this movie or series, she somehow becomes the president of the United States. And there's some sort of crisis, and she issues an order, and the U.S. military doesn't know whether or not to carry out her orders. So the British Prime Minister steps in and orders the U.S. military to listen to the American Commander-in-Chief. And it's supposed to be this big stirring moment. If Joe Biden gave an order during the crisis, then the U.S. military would carry it out. All those good Republican troops would salute and say, yes, sir, and carry it out. And, in the foxholes or whatever, they'd be grumbling and bitching the way U.S. military people have always done. But there wouldn't be a single general who would say, but sir, what does that mean? Blip, 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 blip. This is Hollywood, and the the colonel in charge of the base in Greenland, who got relieved of command, is living in a Hollywood movie, and she got taught you're not in a Hollywood movie, you're in the cold, hard, real world, and your actions have consequences, and now your career is down the crapper. You know,
I really don't get him, Thomas. I really, really, really don't get him. It's if you think your commander in chief is a fucking imbecile and you're not willing to follow orders, considering what your conditions of employment are, I expect your resignation in the morning.
well, okay, we talked about FDR. Before Pearl Harbor, FDR was like shockingly unpopular. And if you look at the political cartoons of the time, they were saying he's leading us into communism. Then Pearl Harbor happened, and the next day, FDR gave his famous speech about a day of infamy, and the U.S. military saluted and said, "What are your orders, sir?" And that was that. That was that. Nobody in the military issued or sent out wires to the troops saying you don't have to obey this communist bastard.
Right.
If anybody had done that, he would have been cashiered. And in that case, in World War II,
if not executed, spend the rest of his life in Leavenworth.
Exactly. But see, Hollywood. Martin Sheen made a TV movie called The Execution of Private Slovik. Eddie Slovik was the only deserter shot by firing squad in World War II. And Martin Sheen played him in a movie. And in the movie, they left out the fact that Eddie Slovik was a career criminal. In the movie, Eddie Slovik deserted for moral reasons. He couldn't fight. And in reality, Eddie Slovik deserted out of cowardice. And he was the only guy who was actually shot. And in the TV movie, they made it seem that everybody involved was deeply in love with Eddie, but they had to carry out these unreasonable orders, and they were all troubled and all of that. So anybody who knows about Eddie Slovik today probably knows about him from a movie that completely erased a real human being and put Martin Sheen in, and made him a good Catholic, which he wasn't. It's that commander, that colonel on the base in Greenland. I'm sure she's seen millions of movies where female commanders refuse to follow orders or whatever, and they
became heroines.
Yeah, exactly.
Heroines. I'm serious. I do hope they slap an Article 88 on her. I do want, and we have the people to do it. I don't want any more impunity.
Well, there is something called main character syndrome, and a lot of leftists seem to suffer from it. And I'm sure that woman had tears of joy and pride running down her face as she composed the email that she sent out to everybody. Part of her email said, I have been thinking about the effect those words must have had on you.
What the fuck is that?
Yeah. She was talking to soldiers. And they were, the words had broken them, had crushed them.
Yes. This is like the wussification of the army, the space of force of whatever. And by the way, you know what? Another thing that I think I read today is that Hegseth instructed that all branches they are to use the standards of the Marine Corps for fitness,
Yep.
male or female.
Yeah.
Eh, by the way, if they apply those standards, half of the fucking Navy doesn't qualify today.
Well,
I'm serious.
under Biden, I saw the fattest soldiers I've ever seen, and there were videos of fat U.S. Marine drill instructors.
Mm.
So, but if they actually start enforcing the fitness standards again,
It's going to be interesting.
we won't see any more female U.S. Rangers. That's for sure.
No, that's for sure. You're not going to see too many female Green Berets either, or SEALs, or fighter pilots.
Yeah, okay, that was a movie. Demi Moore made a movie about a woman who becomes a SEAL.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you've seen.
I think I saw that movie 30 years ago, 20
I actually
something.
never watched it. I wasn't interested, but there have been multiple. There was a case of a professional female soccer team in South America played a team of one-legged men, and the one-legged men won.
Yeah. And remember, what was her name? It was the days of Chris Evans and this woman who were the top female tennis players in the world, not in America.
Navratilova.
No, not Navratilova. Before Navratilova, King was her name.
Oh yeah, Billie Jean King, and she.
Billie Jean King. Billie Jean King had, and unfortunately, was an exhibit game in Forest Hills. She played the number 100 ranking male tennis player who beat her easily in 2 straight sets, 6-0, 6-0. And that kind of showed the enormous difference between the ability of women and men to play tennis. The number 1 female tennis player could beat the number 100 male tennis player. I think if they had gone to 200, it would have been with the same results. We are physically different. What the fuck?
Well, that's why they started women's sports. You know?
Yes.
It's because you didn't want to send your daughter out there on the football field to get literally killed by the 250-pound male football players.
Yeah. And by the way, Ted and I create mandates that we create female sports so that the girls will have a chance to fucking play sports, which has been denied them because there's no fucking way they can play with the guys.
Right. And so
when that is established, you bring the guys, put a fucking wig on them.
That's what leftists do. They're destroying Title IX.
Yes.
The transsexual movement as it stands, the politicized transsexual movement says that men make better women than women do. And it's a profoundly anti-female movement.
Absolutely. Just to be sure, I'm not trading my wife for any of these assholes. They don't make better women than women.
Well, women
they make ridiculous parodies of women.
Women and men are different in so many ways, and there are outliers like you wouldn't believe. They're out there, Saul. There's a woman who could beat the absolute hell out of you and me. You know, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah, because I'm 65.
Well,
when I was 17, there was no woman on the planet who could beat me in the court.
It's possible, but there are physical outliers. But generally speaking, men and women fall within certain parameters that you know. The difference is in the chromosomes. I saw a great video where it was a a friendly wrestling match between a man and a woman, and the man,
How
they
how, how friendly?
well,
Friendly
it
friendly
was
enough to
it
have
was it,
offspring?
it was pretty amazing to watch. But what they did was they started out in the wrestling position, and then the man just stood up, and this woman was crawling all over him, doing everything in her power to try and bring him down. In wrestling, there's all these leg movements.
Yes,
You can She would try all that, and he would just kind of move his legs a little bit. And
that's it.
at the end of the match, it wasn't even a match. He hadn't done anything, and they looked to be almost the same height. They looked to be about the same build. He wasn't a huge Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was a wiry guy, and she could not do anything. But she wasn't angry. It was you could tell that she knew that this is how this was going to go.
Well, that's like Bill J. King's game. Nobody was angry. They were having fun, and they went for a beer afterwards. Uh, but the thing is, you should know what to expect. Renee Richards was the first trans to play as a woman in the circuit.
Mm-hmm.
Was always in the top 10. Um, but she was not a great player. Actually, she was a mediocre player and less. But her serve was incredibly more powerful than any other woman in the circuit. So whenever it was her serve, if she was on a good day and put the first serve in, the other one didn't have a prayer. She didn't play. She served a few times, and that was it. But even then, couldn't win championships because Chris Evert would run circles around her.
I think probably the best female spy movie I've seen is a movie called Atomic Blonde that was set in Berlin in the before the fall of the Berlin Wall, and
Yeah.
it stars Charlize Theron, who is a martial artist. She's a very accomplished martial artist, but in this movie, she went up against mostly Russians, and they beat the absolute hell out of her. And she would only win if she managed to get her hands on a gun that somebody had lost. She would
Yeah.
shoot them, or in one case, she used something like the top of a toilet tank to like brain the guy. But the movie begins with her getting into a bathtub full of ice, and she's nothing but one huge bruise from top to bottom. And it's very realistic. She's defeating them by fighting dirty, like sticking stuff in their eyes and
Right.
pushing them out of windows, or okay, she kicks a lot. The men are using a lot of upper body strength, and she's kicking a lot, and so she's able to inflict a lot of damage. But she's got two swollen eyes. She's got everything. That's the only movie I've ever seen that showed how real. Okay, if you were up against a female trained assassin, and she had been trained how to kill. This is what most people don't understand. Assassins aren't trained to grapple. They're trained to kill you as quickly as they can. So you hear people say, oh, who would win in a fight between a Navy SEAL and a mixed martial artist? Well, mixed martial artists aren't trained to kill people.
The Navy SEAL hands down before the martial artist knows what the fuck is going on.
Well, also, are you going to allow the Navy SEAL to use his silenced pistol? I mean, it's a stupid comparison to make, because they're two completely different forms of, like, you hear people call them combat sports. They're not combat sports. They're contact sports.
Yes.
Mixed martial artists simply aren't trained to kill people, and Navy SEALs aren't trained to grapple. They don't. If you're on the battlefield and you're Navy SEAL, you're not going yay yay yay. You know, you're trained to like
No.
crack somebody's head back and break their neck, and exactly that, like that, exactly. Yeah. So
If the fight is not over in 2 seconds, you're not doing your job.
exactly, and you ambush people, you sneak up on them. You don't jump out in front of them and go, "I challenge you." You know.
Don't forget to bow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, and this is why I don't watch, mixed martial arts. I don't watch people.
It bores me to tears.
It's just not.
It
I mean,
bores me to tears, I guarantee you.
every now and then one of those guys gets drunk and goes out and wreaks havoc, and the cops are called, and the cops just take out their tasers and tase him, or if necessary, he gets shot. The cops aren't there to grapple. They're not there to do fisticuffs with him.
Unless you're in Europe.
Well, exactly.
Yeah, in Europe, they'll try to talk you to death.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I surrender. You're boring me so bad. Just
I saw a video the other day, and it was this fat, ugly woman, and apparently a female cop stops her, and she cracks open the window a little bit, and the female cop tells her, I need your license and registration. Uh, why did you stop me? I need your license and registration, then I'll tell you. And this thing goes on like for 15 minutes. Why did you stop me? I'm not giving it to you unless you tell me why you stopped me. I want to talk to a supervisor. It's like she's talking to the fucking operator at Walmart or something. I want to talk to your supervisor. They do bring a supervisor,
of course, because they're
which to
civilized.
me is because at this point, that woman would be cuffed on the ground with some very fat cop sitting on her back. But no, they bring in a supervisor. Supervisor says, you were speeding 136 in a 35-mile zone. I'm not making it up. That's the dialogue. You were doing 135, 136 in the 35-mile zone, and we need the license and registration. But I've done nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Listen, you need to step out of the car. I've done nothing wrong. Well, can you lower your window, please? I'm not lowering my window because I did nothing wrong. If you don't lower your window, I'm going to have to break it. And this goes on for another 10 minutes where the guy says, if you don't lower your window, I'm going to have to break it at least 17 times. And no, because I haven't done anything. And in 2 seconds, the window is broken, the door is open, and the fat bitch is being cuffed. And the next scene is at the police station when she's in a room by herself, crying and screaming, he broke my window. I did nothing wrong. What the fuck is the problem with these people? How can that woman be driving?
Well, I watch a lot of police body cam, and I'll tell you that the police in Wisconsin are into negotiating with suspects. So please lower your window. Please lower your window. Please lower your window. State troopers in Arkansas say, lower your window. What did I do?
Yeah, that's the way it should be.
I think so. Bring back wooden batons.
Yes, that's the way it should be. You don't argue. You and I have discussed this before. If I'm ever stopped, and I have been in my life, I've lived long enough to have been stopped by cops. This first of all, I know what to do before the cop even gets close. because I don't want to look threatening to the cop.
Mhm.
Windows down, light on, engine off, hands on top of the wheel.
I did. I've been
Uh,
stopped. I've been stopped 3 times. Roll all 4 windows down. Take the key out of the ignition. Put the key on the dashboard. Put both hands on the steering wheel. All 4 times, all 3 times, I was stopped in the daylight, so I didn't need to turn on the overhead.
Yeah.
And they came up and they
I,
looked.
I travel mostly at night.
Yeah, well, they calmed down immediately.
When they see you do that, they're already in a better mood. And that's maybe why I have, in all but 2 or 3 occasions in my life, escaped with a warning,
Yeah,
or
me
or
too.
not even a warning.
Yeah,
Okay, buddy, make sure you keep it under 80. That's it. Then you treat them respectfully. These people don't know when they're gonna get close to a window and get shot at. It's a very tense moment for every cop.
one of my favorite videos. I have a very macabre sense of humor. It was a rookie cop. This was her second time on the road by herself. And she pulled up, and the guy wouldn't roll down his window. He was a middle aged Hispanic guy. And what she didn't know was that this guy had been deported 4 times. He was a murderer. Um, and eventually he rolled down the window. And as soon as the window got down, he fired at her. He fired at her point blank range and missed. And so she went around to the rear of the car, called it in as she's going around. Then she started firing. She emptied her 17 round pistol. And after about 8 or 9 rounds, you started hearing the guy going, I. And then that stopped. And she kept firing, reloaded, and then waited for backup. And by the time backup arrived, he was gone.
Yeah,
But
good.
it was, and her voice never went up. It was like
Yeah.
she was ready for it. And when it happened, she took care of business. And this guy who'd been deported 4 times and was a murderer is now not going to hurt anyone ever again.
No, and by the way, if you didn't do anything, nothing is gonna happen. Let's be.
Yeah.
I don't care what the movies show. The second one is somebody said there about a tape, and they see a new with the guys. I don't submit to searches. Good. That is sufficient reason for a search.
Well, of course.
You just give it the cop what he needs to search the cop. What I think is that guy should be in cuffs, face down, on the pavement, while they're searching him and the car. 2 seconds after he says that,
Yeah.
there is arguing this whole bullshit about de-escalation and all that jazz. If the
Yeah.
guy is refusing to follow a legal order,
Yes. You
it's
have to.
challenging.
This has been ruled by the Supreme Court. You must follow a lawful order as given to you by a police officer,
Period.
regardless of what you think. And just so everybody knows, I was given a ticket. It was a bogus ticket. I stopped at a stop sign and saw the lights go on over there. The guy said I didn't come to a complete stop. I did. But according to him, he didn't see my car after it stopped. He didn't see it slightly fall backward.
Ah,
Yes. So he gave me a ticket. This was a guy who had a quota. I didn't argue. I was able to go to stupid traffic school and just sit there for 8 hours going like this, and
Yeah.
it was over with.
listen,
didn't
you
argue with-
argue if you argue at all, you argue in court.
Well, exactly. And I didn't. Yeah, it was a few $100 for the goddamn ticket. But because I was able to go to traffic school and get it off my record, it didn't
No
matter.
point, another judge, who cares?
Yeah. But
It's cheaper than going to court, unfortunately.
so there are, I mean, cops are they come from the same pool as the rest of us. So there are flawed cops, there are bad cops,
Yeah.
there are evil cops. But if you get pulled over, what cops call it is failing the attitude test. If you fail the attitude test, then
You're already in trouble before you know it. But the other thing too is, even when people fail the attitude test, they're letting them go too far.
yeah,
And you know all of these what the fuck do they call them? Um, who think that the Federal Reserve is an imposition from Mars, and I can print my own driver licenses with
sovereign
sovereign citizens. Those fucking imbeciles. And you see, well, I'm recording you and this, but you cannot record in this place. This is a federal building. Well, I'm not breaking the law. Yes, you are, you fucking idiot.
yeah, yeah,
At that point, they keep arguing with a fellow, sometimes for half an hour.
yeah.
No, at that very moment, he should be on the ground and gaffed.
Well, did you see? It was the most macabre video I've ever seen. It was a woman who'd been a sovereign citizen since she was a child, and she raised her son. He was normal, and then suddenly he became a sovereign citizen. And about a month into his sovereign citizenhood, he got pulled over. And this was in a state where they have a lot of trouble with sovereign citizens. So they immediately called for backup. There were about 12 cops surrounding that car. And he started telling them that he was traveling, he wasn't driving. And if they tried to get him out of the car, there was going to be trouble. And it's like, so they end up breaking the window. And as they're pulling him out of the car, he pulls out a gun. So about 12 cops empty their guns into him. It was like a war. And so they finally pull him out, and his stupid little feet are all pigeon-toed. He's deader than Julius Caesar. And I just thought, what a stupid way to go. You were a sovereign citizen for about a month, and your first encounter with the cops resulted in you getting shot
Yeah,
157 times.
yeah. What he didn't die of gunshot wounds. He died of being an idiot.
Exactly. And
2 nights ago, I think I told you that I live in an area that is at the very end of a very, very fancy strip of sand. I'm on the first building uh, to the north of that, and that very fancy strip of sand with 30, $40 mansions. One of them was built by Madonna in the 80s.
hmm,
Uh, Messi has an apartment on the other end. And because of all of these fancy neighborhood with obnoxiously rich people, there are more cops per capita in this mile than anywhere else on the planet.
hmm,
And there is what they call strict observance speed limit.
hmm.
In Florida, generally, if it says 75, you can do 85. If it says 35, you can do 40, right? And the cops won't even stop you. But in the strict enforcement area, if it says 35, it's 35, baby. 36, you're getting stopped. And every time there is somebody who doesn't know this, and it's coming a little bit faster, especially like at this time of night. Uh, if you go 36, four SUVs with blazing lights appear and behind you, and that's it. And right there is the county line. So some imbeciles actually think that if they make it to the county line, the cops are going to have to stop.
hmm
No, if they already started pursuit, they can follow you all the way to Washington fucking D.C.
Yeah, yeah. See, that's from a movie. That's from like Bonnie and Clyde or something. That's from like a movie in the 1970s.
Right. And because, they cannot stop you on this side of the line.
But they get
But
on
if
the
they,
radio.
but no. But if they started the pursuit to stop you
Mm.
on their side of the line, then they can follow you across county lines all the way till the end of fucking Florida. And wherever they catch up with you, they catch up with you. So in my area, which is about 100 yards from the county line, is where they finally catch up with them and stop them because they thought they could escape, but they cannot. And I had, this car stopped with 5 of these SUVs that looked like tanks from space, and the cops out, guns drawn. And at that moment, I wanted to scream, "Gun!"
Yeah.
And I didn't. I didn't. I mean, I have a very sick fantasy, but I don't necessarily. Can you imagine doing that by the time? Before I stop saying "God," that guy is already shot.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, I've seen cop videos where they're shooting, they're in a gun battle, and another cop pulls up and he just pulls out his gun and starts shooting. He doesn't know who he's shooting at. He doesn't know anything.
And nowadays in Florida, we went through a period last year or the year before. I told you we were through a very nasty period here where there were gun incidents every fucking day on I-95.
Mm-hmm.
Every day. Every single road rage incident turned out with somebody being shot at.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, what the fuck is wrong? It's over. You know how it's over? 20 cops come out of nowhere and trap the son of a bitch.
Mm-hmm.
And the police here have adopted a position of, if you submit nicely and immediately, no fucking problem. If not, you'll be carried by 6.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. And all of a sudden, there are no more road rage incidents. And people behave.
Yeah. Word gets out.
Amazing.
No, word gets out. It's like the and okay, people are so absorbent in watching these videos. You hear somebody say, I want to see a supervisor, and then suddenly everybody's saying, I want to see a supervisor. You hear somebody say, ow, you're hurting me. Then suddenly everybody's saying, ow, you're hurting me. So all of this is being passed around on social media, and these weird little sponges who we call our fellow citizens are watching this. Or they went through a long period of saying, I can't breathe. And finally the cops started saying, if you can talk, you can breathe. And
Yeah,
so
that's it.
they stopped saying, I can't breathe. But now they're saying, ow, you're hurting me.
Oh, good. I remember that a German guy being arrested with that "you're hurting me" shit. Good. It's supposed to hurt.
Yeah.
I personally, I don't give a shit either. But I'm liking the attitude here in Florida because we have to stop this thing.
Mhm.
If we don't have respect for the law and law enforcement, and of course that also means that if you catch a cop being corrupt, you have to nail him to the fucking wall.
Of course. It goes all ways.
It goes both ways.
Cops went through this period where they weren't doing their job because there was no upside to doing their job.
No.
And,
No. And if anything is being proven in Florida is that if you give them the right tools and the right judicial environment, they'll do their job, and that means cleaner streets.
Yeah.
Did you see they were having a pro-Palestine protest
Where?
out west in a square state? And,
Yeah,
and all of a sudden, ICE showed up.
Yeah.
And to see these fuckers with Palestinian flags running alongside the highway with the ICE patrols behind them, it's like, oh, fucking beautiful.
They had one here in LA, and ICE showed up and arrested 54 people, of whom they said all were deported.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, these were all
Unless they were born here.
Their student visas were revoked, and they were sent home.
And that's the way it should be. And that's the way it should be. There is no right to a student visa. It's a privilege.
No, you know, everything is different. Everything's getting better. I have no complaints. And the only thing is, every now and then, you know, I see Jasmine Crockett on TV looking like a complete buffoon, and I just thank God that the Democrats are doing this. That you know, they've decided to embrace madness.
Insanity. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, good for
Anyway, on a good note for this, Chicago has canceled the Cinco de Mayo parade, says poster here. Good.
Yeah.
And they probably did it because they didn't want ICE to show up.
Yeah, of course.
To tidy up with today's show, because we're going to have to go in a moment or in a little while. Think about this. People who throw Molotov cocktails at Tesla dealership, two of them have been arraigned and sitting in jail awaiting trial. 120,000 illegals have been arrested,
Mm-hmm.
and 103,000 or four have already been deported.
Mm-hmm.
Holy shit! This is only 2 months.
Also, okay, apprehensions are down almost 100%
At the border,
at the border.
96%.
Yeah. And then also a hell of a lot of people are self-deporting. The coyotes are actually making their money smuggling.
They're making money taking people back.
Yeah.
Which, you know, idiots.
Yeah.
When you leave, nobody stops you on the way out. Just take a fucking Uber to Tijuana, you fucking moron. It's going to be cheaper.
Yeah.
They're going to stop you on the Mexican side. But hey, that's no problem for you. They stopped the flow of money to NGOs.
Mm-hmm.
They stopped the flow of money to universities that cannot offer guarantees to their Jewish students and minimum policing of their visa students. Minimum means making sure that somebody here with a visa is actually a full-time student, for instance. Columbia University is trying to negotiate its way back, but so far no dice because we don't trust them.
Mm-hmm.
Because the last woman to be president of Columbia, after she signed a deal with the government, talked to the board and essentially said, well, it doesn't matter. We're not going to do any of this. Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
They're cutting all kinds of federal funds to school districts that do not defend Title IX
Mm-hmm.
and ban trans from women's sports.
And the next thing is going to be cutting off money from sanctuary cities.
Oh, they already announced it today.
Mm.
It's been announced today. No federal funding for sanctuary cities. No federal funding for cities that allow trans in women's sports. No federal funding for universities that do not adhere to a strict policy of protecting the freedom of their students. Something that, as you and I know, UCLA is not doing. So that's going to be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I said on the opening words what we were discussing yesterday. Everything we're doing, from fixing foreign trade and relations among civilized nations, to stopping the insanity. By the way, when was the last time you saw anybody vindicate pronouns?
Anyone what?
Vindicate pronouns.
Let's see. I saw somebody, an activist, tell Anderson Cooper at a town hall meeting that her pronouns were they, them. And then her question to Bernie Sanders was, how can we bring young men back to the Democratic Party? And it's like, well, by getting rid of people like you.
By kicking you out.
Yeah.
But you're talking about this is like the fringes of the Democratic Party. The
Mm-hmm.
Democratic Party is reduced to Bernie Sanders, a fucking communist dinosaur, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and that stupid Jasmine blowhard fighting the oligarchy.
Yeah. Which is, again, how many Americans even know what an oligarchy is?
No, most Americans don't know. And for those who do know, there is no oligarchy in the U.S., asshole.
Yeah.
Debbie's saying here something, and it's the last one to see what you think as well, before I start closing. But she says that these universities have got billions in endowments. We should quit funding them. No, this is something that I see repeated all the time, but I don't give a shit how much money they have or not have. Universities developed endowments over time so that they could have an income that guaranteed their functioning in good and bad times. More power to them if they have an endowment to maintain their buildings. Sometimes, people will donate $1 billion. Now, with $1 million, you don't do shit today. We'll donate $100 million to build a new wing, but the university has to provide the funds for its maintenance and operation. And I'm not giving you the $100 until you raise another 100 for an endowment, so that I make sure that my legacy doesn't go dark in a number of years. That is totally irrelevant. We shouldn't give them any fucking money because they're a private institution.
Mm-hmm.
And the federal government not only does not have the obligation to, but it is improper for the federal government to waste taxpayer money on private institutions so that the children of the filthy fucking rich can go and jack off for 4 years in a dorm.
Mm-hmm.
It's not our business.
No.
Now, we can discuss if any money should go into public universities, but as a matter of fact, we should discuss whether there should be any public university. Because by guaranteeing that kids can know our history, can do basic math to break change at a cash register, and get a civic education and a proper level of English, that's as far as I believe the state has an obligation to participate. The rest is up to you and your abilities or lack thereof. But the reason we should not fund these people is not because they have money, it's because we shouldn't fund these people, period. If their alumni are not funding them, why should I take the money from a carpenter from Iowa and put it into Columbia University? Where is the rationale for that? Am I wrong?
No. Every now and then, my college sends me requests for money, and I've never given them a penny. They're in Portland. They're in Portland, Oregon, and they regularly have pro-terrorist marches, and they beat up Jewish students and don't allow in Asians because they're too smart, and then they want my money, and it's like, no. I graduated in 1985. I already gave you, at that time it was about $10,000 a year, and like today, some of the Some of the colleges are costing nearly $100,000 per year. So you have to pay $400,000 to get a college degree.
Yep.
Like,
Anyway, somebody just wanted to prove our point on the way out. Poster says USAID was an oligarchy.
mm-hmm,
Obviously, Poster, you just confirmed our fear
mm-hmm.
that the American people don't know what the fuck an oligarchy is. USAID was a corrupt government department, not even the most corrupt, run by the State Department, but it wasn't the entire government. A government of a few people with concentration of power, say Russia,
Yeah,
where 100 people concentrate the entirety of power and support Putin, and the rest of the institutions of government are superfluous. And what people do is what these 100 decide they should do. And they are corrupt as shit. That is an oligarchy.
yeah.
We do not have an oligarchy in the US. Yes, Thomas. Sorry.
If the Soros family and the Bezos family and
Warren Buffett and Bill Gates,
but their families, if they were
yes,
all in charge of our government, like
that
president,
would be an oligarchy.
secretary of or speaker of the
Yeah.
House, et cetera, and they were making all the decisions. If they had openly purchased their seats, if they had done all the things that Democrats claim Trump wants to do, if they had done all those things, then we'd be living under an oligarchy. But
Yeah.
these idiots who are marching against the oligarchy, they can't even tell you who the oligarchs are.
Or what an oligarchy is.
Yeah. I mean, from the
They cannot tell you who the oligarchs are because at most we have oligarch wannabes in this country.
and they're all Democrats.
They're all Democrats and they're all fucking Democrats.
Yeah,
The last one.
yeah.
But they're oligarch wannabes.
No,
Because they're not in control of government yet.
these idiots are trying to make the argument that Trump's appointees, who were approved of by Congress, are oligarchs, and it's like, I mean, you people, like you're embarrassing yourselves.
Well, when Benjamin Franklin appointed Joseph P. Bradley as postmaster, did that make him an oligarch?
The thing is that the system works as it should, except when it comes to the hidden theft of taxpayer money. But the system is working now in terms of there are means to discover within the system, there are means to discover the problems that the system is undergoing. And Elon Musk has proved that the system does work if you have the will to use the weapons within the system to find out where the theft is happening.
Right.
So the system does work, but you have to have the will to use the system
to use the necessary tools to find the miscreants.
Exactly.
We're going to find out that the first 2 trillion in savings is going to come out of reducing, the kind of sending payments to illegals, prisons overseas, and the dearly departed.
Mm-hmm.
How many billions did that? And sometimes, the billions to the dearly departed are actually millions for Obama, Biden, and company. How the fuck did these people go from $1 to $300 million in 5 years on a government salary?
Yeah.
And you multiply that by the number of Democrat politicians in this country, and you get to pretty much where the money is, and we can do it. And Trump appointing as many advisors and assistants as he needs. It's his prerogative. But
Yeah, he's allowed to do it.
I didn't hear when Obama appointed Van Jones as Green Czar. I didn't hear anybody talk about oligarchy, did you?
No, no.
So, fuckers. Of course, Van Jones was a card-carrying member of the Communist Party of America, who was in the Democratic Party because he fucked the niece of Jimmy Carter, and he's been on CNN since he was forced to resign for the same reason. Um, what can I say? Anyway, folks, we need to go. So remember, we have no other source of income than your support. It's become more difficult without the impulse shopping of sending us a tip on the chat or whatever. So please, if you can, go here, quadverum.com/support us. And if you would have given us a tip on this show, give us that tip over there. And at least we can keep on functioning and paying our bills. Did you notice, Thomas, that we didn't have any internet interruptions today?
Mm-hmm.
I was right. They fixed it. And it's so difficult. Of course, the technicians were from some other South American location, and they come in and say, "Well, if it is outside, if it is inside," I said, "Why don't you take a look over there?" Why? Because the moron who installed it outside didn't put the cover on the channel. The cable dropped, and this is an optical cable. So I bet you 10 to fucking 1 that it broke over there. He goes in, measures, and says, "Oh, it's broken over there." No shit. So I had a broken optic cable that, as it moved, it produced all of these problems that we've had in the recent past. And hopefully it's not fixed. But he didn't have the channel, the cover for the channel, because he is a technician from the company for problems inside the homes, but for problems outside the homes, there's got to be another technician. So he's going to call for the other technician, but if he doesn't show up in a week, and please call back. Do you have any idea how much I miss my bill?
Well, I ordered. If you go online to the German National Archives, it's called the Bundesarchive. You can
Yes.
order digital prints. So I filled out the form, and you can order them as soon as you fill out the form. The picture downloaded, and it was cut in half, and the top half was fine, and the lower half was missing. So I wrote to them, and they said, expect a 4-week delay for response. They responded in one day, and they said, we've set up a special link for you to download the picture here. It's active for 1 month. I've tried all night to download it, and it always times out regardless of the browser I use. So I'm going to have to contact the Bundesarchive again and say, now the special link you've set up for me doesn't work. So Germans, I've paid for this picture. Give it the old college try. Try one more time. I have no idea. I think their server must be a disaster.
Most likely. Anything internet in Europe is shit.
Yeah. I've tried it on 4 different browsers, and it just spins until it times out. It says the connection is timed out. So
they probably, are underdeveloped. They cannot take the traffic.
Well, these people are idiots because they've scanned it. It's like 100 megabytes. This one image.
Right.
So, I mean,
with European internet, it's going to take a month.
It's going to take a month. So, I don't know. Anyway, that's my story.
My story here is that fortunately we fixed that. So People, this is, and if you're watching on
X.
X, I almost have the impulse to say Twitter. If you're watching us on X and you want to help us, you can subscribe right here to at the brother lie, and that's gonna help us. And you may get additional material from time to time. And if you are in YouTube, you can do the same thing, or even click um, on super chats or donations on YouTube. But of course, it's preferable to subscribe on on X, or to send us a payment through quadroom.com/support us, because YouTube takes 50% for themselves. And these other methods take some smaller percentage to pay for the merchant services and all that jazz, which is unavoidable, but not as greedy and grabby as YouTube. And with that, I don't have anything else to say. Terry is saying go to QBTV instead. I told you guys, QBTV has been developed. You guys have seen progress, because before we settled on Odyssey, we used QBTV for a couple of weeks, and it worked like a charm. The problem is the internet bill that I got after 2,000 people watched that thing on every program. So when these things, these videos, are 3 to 4 gigabytes, and there are 4 per week, and 2 to 6,000 people watch these videos during the week, do you have any idea what the bill is going to be for data transfer? You don't want to know. So we cannot do QVTV yet. We need to grow quite a bit and have a different level of income, and then we can do it, because it's already built. The stadium is built. All I have to do is open the door. But we need to be able to pay for the light and the cleaning. You get it? And the lawn mowing. So thank you so much to all of you who help us and make this possible. And Thomas, of course, I have to say this. Do you have a last word for us tonight?
Ineluctable.
Inelectable. You mean like Kamala Harris? Yeah. Inelectable. And sursum corda, for you Catholics know what I mean. Keep your hearts up. America is going in the right way. It's morning again in America. And for my Jewish friends, when you see these, I hope you had a beautiful Pesach and a Seder in with your family, and that you not only enjoyed every moment, although dinners with family are not always enjoyable, but that it was spiritually profitable for you. These things have a new meaning in the last 2 years. Good night, everybody. Good night, Thomas, and thank you so much.